Have a great day.
Well, good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. We are live downtown with CBC. This is your morning show, Information Radio. We're on air till 8:37 a.m. Thanks for joining us, wherever you're joining us, on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app, or maybe you're watching on YouTube. It's kind of strange out there this morning. We don't have a huge dump of snow, but we've got that drizzly, misty, icy snow falling, and it is making it a little bit slushy and icy on the roadways this morning. You might have trouble finding your lanes, depending on where you're driving in Manitoba. And of course, I'm speaking to Winnipeg conditions. So take it easy on the early drive and note that today's temperature, right now, actually, the temperature currently is -7 at the Forks, and we're heading for a high of -2. So we do have a mild day ahead. We'll have lots of melting. Let's say good morning to the team. May McKillop is in for Corey Funk. Good morning, May. May is directing the show, and we'll be covering that commute. Abby Adiyemi is here. Abby is our technical producer on the show and also covers weather on air. Kevin Ipatebo saying hello to you on YouTube. Kevin is our YouTube producer. And also in our control room today, you're going to see Chin Kai Cheng, who is in as one of our interns and working in our unit this week. So welcome, Chin, to the early hour. Let's go to Heather Wells. It's 2 minutes to 6 a.m. and she's here with our headlines.
Good morning. Well, an Indigenous health advocate is skeptical about an investigation into the death of a man this week who waited almost 8 hours in the Health Sciences Centre emergency room. Dr. Barry LaValle at Kiwetanuk Ininu Miniyawan doesn't believe factors like race or socioeconomic status will be examined in the critical incident review. We're going to hear more from him coming up. As well, a Winnipeg man living with cerebral palsy is having a hard time dealing with a recent change to the province's income assistance program for people with disabilities. The province has now introduced a team approach system rather than a single caseworker for each person, each client. We're going to hear the impact of that change coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather's with us, of course, for the morning. Well, we'll get to ask the Premier whether or not socioeconomic status should be examined in this case because he's on with us, Wab Kinew, after 8 for a full monthly interview. Also, we're going to ask him about ERs being used as shelters for people who are living houseless. So we have lots to discuss with Wab Kinew. Right now, though, let's get the latest on those devastating wildfires in LA.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
The director Ramel Ross took a huge swing for his new film Nickel Boys, and that's shooting it all through the point of view of his main characters. Ramel will tell you what inspired that unconventional approach and the power it can hold in storytelling.
You don't remember? Remember what?
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. We begin in Ottawa. The caretakers of the Federal Liberal Party meet tonight. The National Federal Executive will discuss rules for how to select a new leader and, most importantly, how to do it quickly. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will be on the line, but sources say he intends to be neutral throughout the race. Janice McGregor joins us from our Parliamentary Bureau. And Janice, what do Liberal MPs want to see happen when they select a new leader?
Marcia, let's be frank here. It's going to be really hard for the party executive to settle on rules and deadlines that are fair to both new voices who've been organizing from the outside, people like Mark Carney or Christy Clark, and others who until Monday were more focused on their jobs serving Justin Trudeau in critical cabinet roles. MPs said they appreciated the opportunity to speak to the party's president and national director in person at yesterday's caucus to offer their frank assessment of what kind of a contest their present circumstances require. Minister Patty Hajdu spoke to Power and Politics last night about the urgency of doing this credibly.
We want a Liberal Party leader that's elected that has the confidence of not just Liberals, but Canadians, that may be nonpartisan. That confidence comes from a transparent process that is a fair process.
Several MPs raised the idea of limiting eligibility to vote to only Canadian citizens and permanent residents. Temporary residents aren't eligible to vote in general elections, and after everything we've learned at the foreign interference inquiry last year, including them in this process raises more questions about whether Liberals take foreign meddling seriously.
What more do we know about the timelines for this race?
Minister Jonathan Wilkinson, who's considering throwing his hat in, laid out why he thinks this all needs to unfold by early March.
Whoever becomes the leader is going to need to produce a throne speech, is going to need to establish a new cabinet, and is going to need to come up with a full-blown election platform prior to Parliament coming back on the 24th. That's not something you can do in a day.
I'm going to give you a number to keep in mind here. 41. That's the number of days that the Liberal Party Constitution says need to go by between registering with the party and being eligible to vote. If you pull out your calendar and count, you can see why anyone pondering a bid needs to move quickly to get an organization in place and start signing people up, and why party officials supervising this race can't really dither over its rules for very much longer.
Thanks, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. More than 7,500 emergency personnel are fighting the wildfires in Southern California. The losses are devastating.
Here they come! I'm gonna help you!
At least 5 people are dead. 130,000 people are out of their homes. Entire neighborhoods have burned down. City fire hydrants are no match for the flames, says the director of the LA County Public Works, Mark Priscilla.
They are not designed to fight wildfires. A firefight with multiple fire hydrants drawing water from the system for several hours is unsustainable.
CAL FIRE says 5 fires are burning in Los Angeles County. Our Aaron Collins is there.
We have a new brush fire that has just broken out within the last 5 minutes in the Hollywood Hills.
Another day, another fire in Southern California. This one burning near the famous Hollywood sign. Kristen Crowley is the LA City Fire Chief.
I'm going to go ahead and excuse myself so we can go ahead and start mitigating this additional major emergency in the city.
The Los Angeles area under siege, surrounded by flames. People scrambling to get out of an expanding evacuation zone.
The fire was basically encircling us. You could hear explosions all around us.
It's really scary when you can see the flames coming up over the houses 2 blocks away.
More than 1 million people are without power here, resources and manpower on the ground stretched paper thin.
Mother Nature's in charge here, and we're just reacting to it.
A federal state of emergency now in effect in the area. Gavin Newsom is California's governor.
100,000+ people that have been evacuated, lives lost, traditions, lifestyles, places torn asunder.
Dry, windy weather is expected to continue in the area until Friday. The fires that weather is fanning still completely out of control. Aaron Collins, CBC News, Los Angeles.
Donald Trump is using the California fires to resume his feud with the state's governor. He says the governor's water management policy is why firefighters are running out of water.
Well, it's very sad because I've been trying to get Gavin Newsom to allow water to come. You'd have tremendous water up there. They send it out to the Pacific because they're trying to protect a tiny little fish called the smelt. And for the sake of the smelt, they have no water. They had no water in the fire hydrants today in Los Angeles. It was a terrible thing.
Newsom responded, calling Trump's comments pure fiction. In less than 2 weeks, Donald Trump becomes U.S. president. It appears he is prepared to impose tariffs on Canada. Ottawa says that it's finalizing its response plan right now. The CBC's Katie Simpson has new details.
And we're going to make America great again, and we'll see you in a little while. Are you waiting?
Donald Trump stopped by Capitol Hill to strategize with Republican lawmakers as he prepares to return to the White House. The president-elect's language about tariffs has only intensified in recent days, leading Canadian officials to believe he's likely to impose those 25% tariffs as he's threatened. Canada is finalizing its response, which includes a series of retaliatory tariffs on American-made goods. According to a senior Canadian government source, Ottawa is considering targeting steel products made in Michigan and Pennsylvania, a wide range of aluminum goods, glassware, flowers, and ceramics, including sinks and toilets. Ottawa is trying to walk a fine line by selecting items that will create maximum political pressure while also not making life more expensive for Canadians. When tariffs are applied, the added cost is usually passed on to consumers. Trump rejects that idea and sees tariffs as a way to generate revenue for the U.S. and has argued it will help pay off the deficit and even cover the costs of some of his proposed tax cuts. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
The Gaza Health Ministry says the number of dead from the Israel-Hamas war has climbed above 46,000. It says the 15-month conflict has also wounded more than 109,000 Palestinians. It says women and children make up more than half the fatalities. It does not say how many of the dead were fighters or civilians. There's a high level of discontent among recent immigrants about their new life in Canada. A survey conducted for CBC suggests more than 40% feel like leaving. Some respondents pointed to the high cost of living and a tough job market. Karina Zapata reports.
It's okay to give up. It's okay to admit that Canada is not for you.
That's Ali Kina's message to other newcomers who are struggling in Canada like she is. The 26-year-old moved to Calgary from the Philippines in 2023 in search of job opportunities and a better quality of life. But even after completing a marketing certificate at the University of Calgary, she can't find a good job in her field. So she's serving part-time at a restaurant and says she's barely getting by.
To be honest, living here has been like a survival mode for me more than living.
Kina is considering moving back home this year, and she isn't alone in that. 2 in 5 newcomers surveyed said they would consider leaving Canada. Nearly a third would go back to their home countries. University of Calgary researcher Robert Falconer specializes in public policy around migration. He says he doesn't think Canada will see a surge of out-migration because in recent history, few immigrants who express interest in leaving actually do. He says the story might be different for temporary immigrants.
We're very likely to see an increase in the out-migration of international students, of TFWs, et cetera. I think just the restrictions that the federal government have put in incentivize people leaving.
Falconer says newcomers who settle in the prairies and territories are more likely to stay compared with Eastern Canada and British Columbia. Karina Zapata, CBC News, Calgary.
And finally, the Albuquerque, New Mexico bungalow where Breaking Bad was shot is on sale. It's the one with the off-white sidings, brown garage door, and the 2-car driveway. It's the house where the main character and anti-hero Walter White lives with his family as a school teacher, where he pretends to not be a meth king. Nothing in the neighborhood has ever been listed this high at $4 million US. That is 10 times the average house price there. It comes with an interesting backstory of why it's being sold. The owner says she's had enough of fans streaming to her property for a look at the Breaking Bad house. That's World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Can you even imagine if you're like, sure, use my house for this little show, and then it was Breaking Bad and that happens? I guess she's selling. Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for joining us on CBC. We're live in downtown Winnipeg on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube this morning. Well, you can see traffic on our YouTube cameras moving in downtown Winnipeg. What you might not be able to see in that shot is the sort of slushy, icy conditions. So take it easy out there. We've got traffic and weather straight ahead here. First, though, let's talk about what else is coming up on the program. We're going to continue to build on what you've been hearing on World Report about the fires in California, where at least 5 have died and thousands of structures have been destroyed. Those wildfires tearing across LA, and the most striking thing is that in many of the neighborhoods, of course, there's nothing they can do but watch things burn. We're going to hear from a former Winnipegger in LA about how his family has been affected. In addition, this hour, a vision expert is going to share what parents need to know about a growing problem, nearsightedness in children. We've talked about it on the program before, so what does it look like in 2025? Right now, let's go to Heather Wells, who has our headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, a person has died in a house fire in the Arm of Portage la Prairie. RCMP were called to the property north of High Bluff early yesterday. They confirmed the home belongs to Doug Paulson, Chief of Police for the Manitoba First Nations Police Service. Once the fire was out, investigators found human remains inside the home. The identity has not yet been confirmed. We'll hear more on that. As well, the new head of downtown Winnipeg's development agency, says she plans to build back Centre Ventures' capacity to help developers navigate city bureaucracy. We'll hear more about what former PC Cabinet Minister Rochelle Squires has in store as she takes the reins of Centre Venture. That's coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
It is time to check in, as mentioned, with what's going on in the weather today. Abby Adiyemi joins us now. Hi there.
Look outside, snow.
Yeah, I know, right? It's strange, though, because it's kind of coming down lightly, but as I mentioned, it's creating these almost like slushy/icy conditions out there.
Slushy and icy,
Yeah.
you'd say, but it's a mild one. It's kind of cold, but it's mild for this part of the region, and the northern part would definitely see some chilly conditions. Right now, Winnipeg, we are at -7. We're seeing this light snow coming down. This should taper off sometime this morning, leaving mostly cloudy skies behind. And then you would see coming with that cloudy skies, there's still a slight chance of more fluffy stuff to drop on the ground later. And there's a chance of freezing drizzle that might impact commute if you're on the highway today. Though the winds will be picking up from the northwest, giving us more like a breezy conditions. We'll see temperatures drop to -6 this afternoon, Marcy. And then tonight the clouds will break up a bit, and there's going to be a more slim chance of more snow to come before it comes down for the evening. As we move west, Brandon and surrounding areas will see more like partly cloudy skies. Also slight chance of light snow in the forecast, while the Parkland and Pembina Valley regions will be seeing more of the snowy conditions and breezy conditions. The powerful influence, we're looking at mostly cloudy skies, light snow in the forecast there, while further north in Churchill and Thompson, we're seeing more like colder temperatures, and that region will be seeing heavier snow. But in Winnipeg at this time, we're just seeing this light snow coming down, cloudy skies. That should taper off this morning, and then a high of -6. So it's more like a mild day in the city.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Well, May, it's one of those, May McKillop's here with the commute. It's one of those mornings where we really got to, everything hinges on what's going to happen. Will it be more melty or more freezing
It's
out there
a bit
today?
of a wait and see.
Yeah.
Are the freezing rain conditions going to get in the way? I noticed this morning when I got in my car, it's a quick dust of the car, and you don't have to scrape the windows.
That's a nice feeling.
That was my experience in the city here, but we're seeing some snow-covered conditions, some reduced visibility, and of course that possibility of freezing rain, which I'll keep an eye on throughout the city, throughout the show, and update you all. Looking at the highways outside of the city, though, particularly northeast of Winnipeg, on along highways 8, 9, and 59 towards Gimli, Victoria Beach, Lac-du-Bonny area, there's snow-covered conditions. Now, if you're looking southeast of the city, it's a little bit more covered in snow, and particularly looking at reduced visibility. Now, that's along Highway 59 towards St. Malo, and as well as Highway number 1 outside of the city, southeast. In the west side of the province, we're seeing some partly covered conditions on Highway number 1 through Verdon and Elkhorn, and as well through Riding Mountain, partly covered conditions through Riding Mountain up until about Dauphin. I'll keep an eye on the conditions and update you all throughout the program today, but if you're seeing anything out there, give me a call. As well, I will say you can always check highway conditions on 511. But if not, give me a call, and I'll update your listeners. 204-788-3093.
6:16 is the time right now. I don't know about you, but I was glued to some of the coverage yesterday afternoon watching these wildfires in California. I mean, reporters standing there as structures were literally falling behind them. Reporters who were considered in a safe zone to be reporting, fleeing scenes and hoping they themselves would get out. That's how quickly things are moving. And then I think the most impactful thing that I was watching was, interviews with firefighters as things burn around them, and they said they have nothing they can do, that the water in that part of their region was, not enough or had run out. So lots going on in LA. In addition, this morning, if you had missed World Report, of course, there was another fire that broke out, this one near the Hollywood sign, which, of course, is iconic to people like us in Manitoba who might have visited down there. And that was contained. But just all kinds of major major historic issues with fire. So still this morning, we know that 5 people have died. That's the number that we have. There are at least 6 separate blazes. There are thousands of homes and businesses affected. There's 150,000 people under an evacuation order. So just to reiterate what you may have heard on World Report. Well, Colin Friesen lives there. He was born and raised here, though, in Winnipeg. He lives in central LA with his partner, Stephanie Chakowski. And they spoke, both of them, with CBC's Corey Funk yesterday.
Well, the sun has managed to finally punch through the massive amounts of smoke that has been sort of overlaying the city for the last, 6 to 8 hours, I would say. So it appears that the winds have died down a lot. Last night it was pretty loud and pretty rough. They're actually fixing the balcony outside of our apartment, so there's a large scaffolding out there that we thought might topple over in the middle of the night. But luckily this morning we looked out and everything was where it was supposed to be and in reasonably good shape.
And how concerned are you about having to evacuate? You said you're kind of in central LA.
We're both, they keep spreading on over. So for the closest 2 fires to us are a little further east. Our biggest worry is that we live very close. We live within walking distance of Griffith Park, and with the way the winds are, what has been happening is there's been hurricane winds that are knocking down power lines. We've also had transformers exploding, and the worry is also for us in where we are centrally is that something happens and then Griffith Park goes up in flames. So we're in a high alert area, but we haven't been flagged to pack a bag and get ready to go yet.
And how prepared are you for that occasion? Because I guess this doesn't look like this fire is going away for any time soon.
Yeah.
Like, how concerned are you that it could get worse?
Well, I mean, you're always concerned that it could get worse. We've been, you track, as Stephanie said, you track the fire apps like they're a hockey game to see who's in front and see how much time is left in the game. They said the winds were going to die down today a little bit, and they certainly have. So we haven't thrown our passports in a go bag and stuffed it by the door just yet. But I think we've both done mental inventories of, if we have to leave, what do we grab off the walls? What do we take? What's of any actual value here? Because we have friends who lived live past tense in the Palisades, and their house is now gone. They're in a hotel room with, I'm not sure if they're there with their kids, but with all their worldly possessions, and everything they own is within, a giant bedroom that they're sitting in. So,
well, they evacuated and then they sat and watched on television as their building burned. Like it's incredibly surreal because there's also these weird pockets of like apocalyptic smoke with like a blue horizon. So if you drive suddenly, it goes away based on the wind. And it's like you hit one part of LA. If you go further south, there's not trees all over the ground and debris. It's a really surreal experience at the moment that based on weather can really change. I don't want to say in an instant because it sounds so cliche, but it's true.
Yeah. We've also been, getting ready to take in anyone who may have to leave their house or lose their house. So it's been, do they need our help? Okay, reach out to them. No, they're okay. They are coming? Okay. We had a family that was coming for about half an hour, and then they found another place closer to home. So we're trying to be good citizens of the world down here by, keeping our doors open and hoping like hell it doesn't happen to us.
And what's the mood like in the city right now? I mean, like there must be folks like you who are kind of on the edge of whether you'll be truly affected or not. But what's the vibe when you go out into town?
Well, LA is a town where you live in your car and your house. But Steph was out actually interacting with people today, so I'm going to let her tell you.
Yeah, I actually am a fitness instructor in Pasadena, and that's where in Altadena is where one of the major fires is, and there's a little bit. I went to the gym at 6 a.m. this morning, which I was surprised was open, and there were people coming to the gym because I think I unfortunately lived through 9/11, and there's something that happens when you're in this place and you don't know what to do, where you just want to do something that's normal. On the flip side, you have people across the street going to evacuation centers. I think there's a lot of anxiety. What I think overall and what I'm seeing interacting with threads and social media is, LA coming together and people reaching out to other people. And I think underneath the absolute tragedy of this is a real connection of human spirit just trying to survive and make sure our fellow Angeleans are okay.
How surreal it would be, especially because of the strong winds, right? As they were describing, to feel like, well, things are all right. You know, the sky is blue, and then all of a sudden you're in this absolutely emergent situation. So the images continue to come out, and the stories continue to come out of LA this morning as the situation is not contained. That was Stephanie Chakowski, her partner Colin Friesen. They were born and raised in Winnipeg, but they do live in central LA. The latest coming up on World Reporter. You can go and see some of the images we've been referring to on our website as well, nationally, cbc.ca. 6:22 is the time right now. -7 is the temperature with light snow falling in Winnipeg, and our temperature will be around -6 actually for the day. We do have that snow expected to end this morning and a risk of freezing drizzle in our forecast for Winnipeg. Well, as you may have been hearing on World Report this week, the number of children with myopia or nearsightedness is growing dramatically in Canada and worldwide. Now, there's lots of reasons why this is happening, but there are also ways that children can be protected. To talk about it, Dr. Debbie Jones is here. She's a clinical professor at the School of Optometry and Vision Science at the University of Waterloo. Good morning.
Good morning.
So we actually were talking about this last year at this time. So year over year, obviously things haven't improved. Can you tell us what you're seeing in children when it does come to their vision?
So we're seeing an increase, as you mentioned, in the number of children that have myopia, and there's a worldwide prediction that by 2050, 50% of the world's population will have myopia. And just to point out what that means, myopia is where without a vision correction, you don't see clearly in the distance, but you see clearly up close. And really things haven't changed very much since we last spoke. I mean, we're still seeing this increase. And we think, and you know, when you look at what's happened in the world over the last few decades, what's changed? What's changed is what we do socially. We spend a lot of time on digital devices, both for children, it's academic, and it's also a lot of their social time. And that increased amount of use of near activity seems to give the signal to the brain that the vision needs to be in focus close to and maybe not so much in focus in the distance.
Well, what will it change? I mean, obviously you can reduce screen time to help change things, but how much reduction would actually make a difference in improving the health of a child or a teenager's eyes?
It's such a great question. We don't have good numbers on, you know, what the kind of limit is, what tips the balance. We do know that spending time outside is protective against the onset of myopia. So those children that spend more time outside are likely to start with myopia later. And that's really important because the earlier, the younger a child is and the earlier they start becoming myopic, the higher the end prescription, because myopia changes over time, and the younger you are, the more years you have in your kind of active growing phase for the eyes to change. So if we can delay the onset, we're giving that child a benefit in the long term. And the reason we worry, and parents may think, well, so what, they need to wear a vision correction. The reason we worry is that as the eye gets longer and gets more myopic, there's a stress on the retina, and that can cause problems in later life that can be devastating. I mean, we can have vision loss that's not recoverable later in life, retinal detachment, retinal degeneration. So we want to protect the child now for something that might happen when they're in their 50s or 60s. And so, you know, it is really important to delay that onset if we can.
When you say spend more time outside, I'm just imagining going to the park and lying on the grass and looking at my phone. So we're talking about outside without phones, or is there something about the light outside that is an improvement for our eyes?
It is daylight, so the intensity of daylight seems to have a protective mechanism. We don't really understand fully what the mechanism is, but we know that children who spend more time outside are less likely to need a vision correction. But yes, we're hoping also that the digital devices are put away so that you're not, you know, lying under a tree on a tablet watching a cartoon or something.
Yeah,
so,
of course.
you know, the idea is you're looking into the distance The contrast outside is very different. It's very much more muted, when you're looking at trees and grass and things rather than the solid black and white that we look at on our digital devices.
And just as a reminder, when should parents, start getting their children's eyes checked, and how frequently should you think about that?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because parents are often quite shocked when we say first eye exam at 6 months of age because obviously, a child at 6 months can't read the letters, but we want to make sure that everything's on track. And then the recommendation is kind of before, around the age of 3, and then probably annually thereafter. I actually just tell parents, bring them in when they're an infant, and then whatever month of the year is your month for an eye exam, just remember every year, bring them in. I just put children on an annual reminder, and then parents get into that routine of bringing them in. And there's no substitution for taking a child to an optometrist. We don't expect parents to look in a child's mouth and decide whether a child has cavities or not. We expect them to take them to the dentist. It's the same for eyes. Don't assume that you would know if your child has a vision problem because you may not.
Thank you so much for being with us this morning.
You're very welcome.
That's Dr. Debbie Jones, clinical professor at the School of Optometry and Vision Science at the University of Waterloo. Let's get some music going before the news. This is Get Go from His out of Toronto.
I got a new home, I gotta get I've been killing so much time from the get-go. I got a new show I gotta get on. I've been wasting so much time, don't you know?
Short little ditty. That is his and Get Go. On CBC, I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at the show. Thanks so much for joining us. We got some light snow falling this morning in Winnipeg. It's -7. Brandon's -2. Thompson, light snow and drifting snow as well, and it's -6 on your Thursday morning. Well, Christy Ramlichan's coming up with business news, and today she's going to talk about banking news and where big banks in Canada stand on their environmental goals. So that's her angle there. Also, we're going to hear about more instability in the retail sector, and these are stores that you'll recognize here in Winnipeg. We're talking about Ricky's and Clio. Apparently, the Ontario company behind them is having some serious challenge. So there's some closures coming, and we're going to hear more about that from Krista Lee. So business news right after your CBC Winnipeg news.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 6:30. We're sliding into Thursday. It's going to be mild, but we've got a little bit of light snow, risk of freezing drizzle as well early this morning. Snow ending later this morning, becoming windy, and our high of -2 is going to fall to -6 this afternoon. An Indigenous health advocate is skeptical about an investigation into the death of a man this week who waited almost 8 hours in the Health Sciences Centre emergency room. Dr. Barry LaValle is CEO of Kiwetanuk Ininu Miniyawin. He doesn't believe factors like race or socioeconomic status will be examined in a critical incident review. LaValle says if investigators determine the middle-aged man was not exhibiting symptoms, that is not an excuse.
The confluence of context for this one man was that he needed some help. If you couldn't hear him asking for help, then you're the problem.
LaValle also takes issue with hospital officials saying many people were seeking shelter from the cold, causing the ER to be congested. He says people can't be blamed for being poor. Manitoba's health minister promises a final report on the death will be made public. A person has died in a house fire in the RM of Portage La Prairie. RCMP were called to the property north of High Bluff early yesterday. They confirmed the home belongs to Doug Paulson, the chief of police for the Manitoba First Nations Police Service. Once the fire was out, investigators discovered human remains inside. The identity has not yet been confirmed. While wildfires burning across LA County have now claimed 5 lives while forcing tens of thousands from their homes. Now, some of dozens of emergency crews doing battle with 5 wildfires, all being fueled by those powerful Santa Ana winds. And I correct that, there are now 6 wildfires. 1 is under control. More than 150,000 have been ordered out of their homes. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass.
This firestorm is the big one in magnitude. Hurricane-force winds are usually accompanied by rainstorms. But these are hurricane-force winds that are combined with extremely dry drought conditions.
And those conditions are not forecast to change. At least 5 people reported dead. Officials are certain the toll will rise. U.S. President Joe Biden has canceled his trip to Italy to visit the Pope because of the fire situation. You can hear the latest on that story coming up on World Report at 7. The new CEO of Winnipeg's Downtown Development Agency is expected to create more housing. As CBC's Bartley Kivas reports, the new boss at Centre Venture is also tasked with restoring the agency's relevance.
Centre Venture is poised to do some really, really neat things.
Rochelle Squires is a week into her job at Centre Venture. The former PC cabinet minister has been handed the task of creating housing in downtown Winnipeg for people of all income ranges.
Centre Venture has a new mandate thanks to the new administration at City Hall with a focus on residential units, which I found really appealing given my background as a cabinet minister.
Squires is also expected to restore Centre Venture to a semblance of its former power. The agency has been somewhat sidelined since a rift formed between it and former Mayor Brian Bowman. That was in 2014, when True North Square was in the planning stage. Jim Ludlow is president of True North Real Estate Development. He says hiring a name like Squires signals Centre Venture's back.
It's a pretty strong signal for the organization that it's going back to a role of activity.
Developers say Centre Venture also has to resume cutting through red tape on their behalf. Bartley Kivas, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A change to a provincial income support program is making life more difficult for a Winnipeg man who lives with cerebral palsy. Manitoba Supports for Persons with Disabilities phased out individual caseworkers last month. Instead, they have introduced a team approach system where clients have to go through the central email and phone number to speak to any available caseworker. The change has been hard on Alex Litwin, who can no longer contact his individually assigned caseworker. David Cron is the executive director at the Cerebral Palsy Association of Manitoba.
When you go from an individual worker to a team approach, as the province says, you lose that individuality where you get to know the worker, they get to know you, you build up a bit of a relationship, a bit of trust.
The province says the team approach will allow for benefits to be processed and completed in a more timely, consistent fashion. And a Winnipeg City Councillor wants the City of Winnipeg to expropriate land from a private owner to stop the development of LeMay Forest. Russ Wyatt has written a formal letter to the leaders of the province and city yesterday, echoing those words.
You have to look at this sort of thing over many years and generations, that the city makes investments in new parks. It's not just one generation that technically pays for it, it's many generations that will have this investment going forward.
The privately owned land has been the scene of a standoff over the past several days. Protesters trying to stop the removal of trees by blocking access by the landowners. You can find more of these stories on our website. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells, live in our news center this morning. Well, just before we turn to weather and traffic, I'm going to give you a preview of the next hour, and we're going to mention what we posted on Facebook. And if you're up early, maybe you want to weigh in. So in the next hour, provincial exams are back in Manitoba. Maybe in your house you've written one, or maybe someone that you know is writing one. Maybe you're a teacher, so you're involved in that way. English is a provincial exam this year. Again, math is back as well. Coming up, we will hear from a teacher who says that some of the research he's done on this shows that he believes more standardized tests are needed in Manitoba. He says Manitoba kids are still underperforming in math and English, and by the stats, that's correct. But he says he's going to join us to talk about what he thinks is needed to get kids back on track. So we'll have that interview coming up. But if you want to weigh in, you can write on Facebook or call us. We'd love to have calls on this. I've just posted on my Marcy Marcusa page. Provincial exams are back. How are you doing with them in your house? So let us know what changes you might propose or not, and what you're thinking about it. We haven't had exams for a number of years here. So the first day of testing for grade 12 students was on Tuesday in English. This is the first standardized English tests in our province since 2019, before the pandemic. So this is a significant return, I guess, to what we had been doing 5 years later here. So how's it going in your house with these exams? 788-3205, 788-3205, or you can weigh in online. All right, let's at 6:37 a.m. get to Abby Adeyemi, who's here with a look at our regional forecast now in Manitoba.
Good morning once again. Looking across the regions, we are going to see down south, a mild one. We should see a mix of cloudy skies. Some light snow we felt here and there. Some freezing drizzle will also be in the forecast. Out you move north, you're going to see chilly temperatures. Looking at conditions in Winnipeg and surrounding areas, -7 at this time. We're noticing that light snow outside. That should taper off by mid-morning, leaving mostly cloudy skies behind. And some of the light stuff will try to hang back as we get into the day, though. Some present drizzle also in the forecast. It will be breezy from the northwest. Expect a high of -2 today, and then temperatures will drop to -6 by the afternoon period. So I call it a mild day. Heading west in Brandon, it is currently -3. We're looking at cloudy conditions there. It will be mainly cloudy for the most of the day, though there's a slight chance of flurries in the forecast. We'll see temperatures drop to around -7 by the afternoon in that part of the province. We're seeing light snow falling in the Pembina Valley region. Temperatures around 0 at this time. Light snow that you're noticing will be tapering off this morning. Then we'll see some light breezy conditions, and temperatures will be around -1. Though for that part of the province, we're looking at there's a slight chance of a freezing drizzle sometime during this morning. So you want to take care if you are on the highway in that part of the province. In the Parkland region, we're seeing temperatures also around 0. Dauphin is currently hovering around 0 at this time. Mainly cloudy skies, a good chance of flurries. Temperatures will drop to around -8 this afternoon, though with the wind chill, it feels like -15. And then in the Interlake region, we're seeing temperatures around -7 for Gimli and surrounding areas, with snow falling at this time. Expect this light snow to taper off as you get into the morning, leaving behind mostly cloudy conditions, and we're looking at highs for that region to reach -2. Then it drops to -6 later in the day. In the Pamphlet Flow, we're seeing temperatures around -7 in that region. Mainly cloudy skies. We're seeing slight chance of flurries also in the forecast. Breezy conditions, it will calm down as you get into the day, and then we see temperatures drop to -13. Thompson also at -6, hovering near -7. Light snow falling. Expect cloudy skies, and temperatures will drop to -19. The wind chill this morning, though, feels like -29. Then you go farther north to Churchill, where temperatures around -13. We're seeing the light snow whipping around, so it might be a concern in that part of the region. That should taper off this morning. Then you'd notice local blowing snow. Those are the snows that settled on the ground will definitely be blowing around in the afternoon, so you want to take care if you're driving. Temperatures will fall to -20, though the wind chill this morning feels like -34 for folks in Churchill, so you want to take care. So in summary, Mercy, the southern regions, we're looking at a mild day with, some light snow and maybe some freezing drizzle somewhere in the middle, and temperatures around will drop to around -2. But right now we're seeing 7s across board.
Do you know what I realized, you guys? May McKillop's about to talk about traffic here, so I'll invite you onto the air. I have no idea how to dress for winter in other provinces. So I'm going to Vancouver later this month, and I've got, niece and nephew there, and so they were asking if I want to go snow tubing. So in my Manitoba head, I'm like, I got to pack like major layers and like snow pants, and exactly. And I'm like, I'm just taking a carry-on. How am I going to do this? And then I realize, I look up the long-term forecast forecast, and I'm thinking it's going to be like 6 degrees when we're snow, right? I'm like, oh man, I could go in shorts, like no problem.
Just grab an umbrella or raincoat.
I know, right?
As someone who lived on the West Coast for 10 years, if you need some advice, I got you.
Okay, good. We'll do that off
You
air
need a
because
collection.
I'm gonna. If I pack like a Manitoban, I'm gonna be drastically. I have way too many layers. I think.
Overdressed.
Right. All right. Let's get into what May is here for, which is traffic.
Looking here in Manitoba with that the light snowfall overnight, we're seeing some snow-covered conditions. I noticed it here in the city this morning. We have some reduced visibility. There was a bit of trouble seeing the lines on the streets here in the city. I haven't gotten any calls on the commuter line about conditions here in the city or anything getting in the way of the commute, but I will look along the highways just outside of Winnipeg here, particularly in the north, particularly in the eastern side of the province outside of Winnipeg. The northeastern and southeastern, we're both seeing snow-covered conditions and some reduced visibility. And of course, as Abby said, with the potential for freezing rain, we could get some slick conditions. Particularly highways number 8 and 59 north of the city, and looking 59 south as well, and Highway 1 south of the city. And I'm starting to see in the western side of the province just some partly covered conditions on some of the smaller highways. 511 to look for at the detailed highway conditions, and anything else you're seeing getting in the way of your commute, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, May. May McKillop's in for Corey this morning, and in fact, most of next week, I think, as well. Crystalie Ramlakan is at our usual post with business news next on CBC. Hi there.
Hello, good morning, Marcy.
So let's talk about banking news and where big banks in this country stand on their environmental goals.
Yeah, so RBC and BMO are signaling that they may follow U.S. banks out of the Net Zero Banking Alliance, which is the biggest climate finance alliance. So in recent weeks, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Citigroup, and JP Morgan Chase have all left. Now, this is at the same time there's been backlash against environmental initiatives as Donald Trump returns to the White House. Now, the banks say they haven't changed their net zero emissions goals, but there has been criticism that these voluntary alliances haven't had a meaningful impact on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And so now Canadian lenders are showing signs of reconsidering their membership. So at an industry conference in Toronto this week hosted by Royal Bank, RBC's CEO said pulling out hypothetically doesn't lead to a non-commitment to net zero or climate change. He said it just means the organization maybe isn't the right mechanism to do it. And BMO's CEO said the bank is still a member of the alliance. He said the bank has a commitment to climate transition, but also has a commitment to legacy energy customers, and said what mechanism you choose to join or bodies that you choose to align with to enforce that, that's just a pathway. And, this is all very significant because Canadian banks were some of the biggest providers of finance to oil, gas, and coal last year.
Let's move to another story. Retail news. Again, more instability in the sector.
Yes, so clothing stores Ricky's and Clio are shuttering. The Ontario company behind them, Comark Holdings, is filing for creditor protection. So the company operates 75 Ricky's stores, 54 Clio stores, and 20 joint locations. And a note on Clio's website says that effective January 17th, its stores will no longer accept returns or gift cards, nor will it be able to redeem or receive loyalty points. And the company also operates Bootlegger and is looking at reducing its footprint as well. Now, retail analyst Doug Stevens says Ricky's and Clio are challenged by the fact that they aren't quite discount brands, but they don't qualify as luxury brands either.
They are really, sort of relics of a different time when society looked different, when the middle class was certainly more robust and there was less income and wealth polarization. And today that's simply not the case. Consumers on both sides of the economic equation are looking for either premium products that have, luxury brand status, or they're looking to get their hands on the cheapest products they can find. And so if you're a brand that fits somewhere in the middle of that equation, you're just being looked right past.
So, a court-appointed monitor says the company has been negatively impacted by the pandemic, a ransomware attack in 2021, more competition from ultra-low-cost fashion retailers, and supply chain and vendor issues. And it's unclear when the stores are going to close. We've reached out for more information, but we haven't heard anything yet.
And finally, wildfires. We've already been talking about this, of course, in the program this morning. They've devastated parts of LA. We heard from a former Winnipegger living in central LA about what that's been like. But what's the scale of the losses when you look at this economically?
So estimated damage and economic loss is already at $50 billion. And that's according to the U.S. private forecaster AccuWeather. The raging wildfires have killed at least 2 people, destroyed hundreds of buildings, and have stretched firefighting resources. And AccuWeather says if the fire spreads to densely populated neighborhoods, losses could be even higher. It says this may become the worst wildfire in modern California history, based on the number of structures burned and economic loss. And for some comparison here, the total damage and economic loss from the 2023 Maui fires were between $13 billion and $16 billion. So this is already, far worse.
And the updated number actually that's coming out now is 5 people have now died in those fires. Yeah. What are the numbers looking like this morning, Christly, the markets?
So in Europe, stocks are slightly higher as global markets focus on the inflation outlook. Germany is down, though, right now. The UK and France are both up. In Asia, markets are falling. So Japan, Shanghai, and Hong Kong are all down. Oil is up at 20 cents to $73.52 US per barrel. Gold is up at $10.50 to $2,673.60 US per ounce. And the dollar is down 0.05 of a cent to 69.5 cents US.
All right. Thanks very much, Crystal.
Okay. Thanks, Marcy.
Crystal Round-McCann is here daily at this time on Information Radio on CBC with our business news. It is 12 minutes to 7 o'clock on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. Kevin Ipatebo, as well as May McKillop and Abby Adiemi on our team behind the glass in the control room. Heather Wells is here with news, and she will be here with next headlines before the top of the clock. In the next hour of the show, we are going to be talking more about provincial testing being back in Manitoba for the first time since 2019. And then after 8 o'clock, still ahead if you're making an appointment with radio, Premier Wab Kinew is going to be here for our monthly interview. We have a lot of questions about the death in the HSCER. And so we'll hear more from Heather about the latest that we know on what happened to this man on Tuesday. And also, of course, we'll have a lot of questions for the Premier when he joins us live in our studio here at CBC. Next on the program, little music from an artist out of Toronto named Nia Natarata, who describes her debut EP called Still Living with My Parents as a musical journey through the highs and lows of emerging adulthood. And this tune's called Boohoo.
When I could be anywhere, you're acting weird. Got your teeth in my neck, I don't know how they got there. You talk to me like you own me, give me advice that I don't need, just hear me out. I don't know where we are, but I guess that we made it this far, but I might have to put it on hold. No, you know that I'm right. We're doomed, there's nothing you or I can do, it's true, there's nothing for us to lose, boo, yeah, I'm giving up on you, we're doomed, there's nothing you or I can do, it's true, there's nothing for us to lose, boo, yeah, I'm giving up
It's a nice tune. Maybe she won't be living with her parents much longer if her music takes off. The EP's called Still Living With My Parents. The tune's Boohoo. Nia Nadarata is the artist. Ooh, I like that tempo change at the end. Very cool. 9 minutes to 7 o'clock on 89.3 on CBC. Well, next on the show, earlier this week, we were talking about resolutions, how to stick with them. Dr. Bardwaj was on yesterday on the medical column talking about making the exercise resolution stick, and also that moving is just as important as engaging in exercise that gets you sweaty and is really aggressive. But let's talk about something else this morning. Let's talk about social media influencers and fitness trends and how they impact us, because there's a lot of sort of pressure if it's not coming from someone in your own life. Maybe it's coming from online. Lee Vanderloo is our guest, the scientific director for Participaction, which of course is a national nonprofit that encourages people to get healthy by being active. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So as if we didn't have enough pressure, now we have all these people on social media, showing things and saying things. What's your sense of this, and whether or not it's a concern or whether or not it is actually something that helps people get moving?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've never before lived in a world where we're being, completely inundated with content and information and curated materials, 24/7. And so, it is a real thing that we need to be mindful of. But I think, some of the initial things is that for some people, it can serve as some motivation. It can help with accountability. There's a lot of great people out there delivering a lot of great work for, even, free materials, which is great, making it a little bit more accessible, making it a little bit more personal and relatable. And so, for some people, if it's, you're following a particular influencer that, is talking about their journey of where they started first, it makes it relatable. We feel like, hey, they were once like me and now, look at where they are now. That can be really great. But at the same time, we really have to be mindful of the fact of, this is very curated content we're being fed. The algorithms are very strong. And, sometimes some of these individuals are out there to sell a product. They're out there to sell a program. And so, we want to do our due diligence and ensure that, we're being mindful who's putting out that content. Is this a fitness professional? Is this just someone that enjoys staying fit? All, good reasons, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think, that's where that little bit of realism comes into place, that, is this a realistic goal or target for me right now based on my starting point? When it comes to physical activity, it should be something that brings us joy, that we're building positive associations with. It's not to say that it's going to be comfortable all the time or that we're not going to feel a little bit of stress and strain and, huffing and puffing, but it really should be something that we consistently want to return to because it makes us feel better about ourselves. And if we're finding ourselves in this negative space that we're constantly putting ourselves down because we're not looking a certain way or looking like the people that we see on the screen, that becomes more problematic. And that's when I would want to intervene, and really start to consider, are these the best individuals that I should be following? Is this bringing me peace? Am I experiencing grace? Or is this actually turning into something that's, making me feel not so great and actually decreasing my self-esteem?
How do you feel about before and after pictures that get posted by influencers?
Yeah, I mean, there's a time and place, and it's different for everyone. Again, if it makes it a little bit more relatable in terms of, what their starting point is and, where they were or the steps that they took to build these changes. And if these changes happened over a year or multi-months, for some people, that might be helpful to know, I can do this too. It's going to take time.
But sometimes they're fake, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's something, you think back to at least when I was growing up in the early 2000s, around, magazines and, really trying to realize just how airbrushed they were and that this is not what people necessarily look like. And so that's the thing is we can't put a filter on real life on our day-to-day. And I think that's something we really need to be mindful of. If there's really significant changes that are just not possible, that's where, we need to kind of practice a little bit of that due diligence and realize this is not the one for me to be following.
Lee, I remember when we spoke last year in the new year and you were talking about it was more like interval training, like walk and then and then a little bit of maybe you run a bit, then maybe you walk a bit. What's the trend this year in terms of healthy trends? Are you still on interval training, or Dr. Bardwaj this week was talking about really just thinking about movement?
Yeah, and I mean, I would, 100% agree with, what Dr. Bourgeois said is that, we do want to be aiming for sustainable change. And so finding ways to sprinkle more movement throughout the day, every day, is going to benefit us in the long term. Of course, if you want to have those high interval training or so like HIIT training, or if you want to place work, stuff like that, all of that is bonus. Something is better than nothing. More is always better. But I think the benefit of just adding more movement to our day is, one, it helps us value the place that physical activity has in our lives, that it's more of a need to have versus a nice to have. But not only is it going to ensure that we're increasing our levels of physical activity, it's also going to play a really important role of decreasing our sedentary behaviors, or how much time we're spending being sedentary or sitting. And we really need to be focusing on both those behaviors and thinking of them as separate and distinct from one another, rather than just two extremes on the same spectrum.
Appreciate your time this morning, and Happy New Year to you. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Take care.
You too. That's Lee Vanderloo, who's a scientific director for Participaction. Time to go to Heather Wells, now 3 minutes to 7 o'clock, for once again an update on what's making news and our headlines.
Good morning. Well, a person has died in a house fire in the arm of Portage La Prairie. RCMP were called to the area north of High Bluff early yesterday. They confirm the home belongs to Doug Paulson, the chief of police for Manitoba First Nations Police Service. Once the fire was out, investigators discovered human remains, the identity not yet confirmed. The new head of downtown Winnipeg's development agency says she plans to build back Centre Ventures' capacity to help developers navigate city bureaucracy. Former PC Cabinet Minister Rochelle Squires is Centre Ventures' new CEO. We'll hear how that organization might do, how that agency might look different under her leadership, coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
-7 in Winnipeg. Light snow continues to fall. Today we're going to be around -6 for the day, and then we have a risk of freezing drizzle with us early this morning. So keep that in mind as you're heading out the door, whether you're walking or if you're driving. I know that I found the lanes kind of slushy, but with more traffic, of course, that might just end up melting off. We'll see how it is. Please update conditions with May, who's on the traffic commuter line, 788-3093, and do check highways before you head out, of course. In other conditions, nothing urgent to report at this hour. This hour is 2 minutes to 7 o'clock, and coming up, would warning labels on alcohol reduce the risk associated with consumption? We're going to hear from a Gen Zer about why she chooses not to drink. Also, grade 12 students are currently writing provincial English exams for the first time since 2019. CBC's Jim Agapito went out to talk to students who are coming out of the exams, how it went, and then we'll get an opinion from a teacher about provincial testing being back. He says Manitoba kids are underperforming in math and English, and they are, but he has ideas on what's needed to get kids back on track.
On The Current. Chaotic information environment, which is just filled with lies and rage and spin.
We are living in a world where we can access information more easily than ever before, but the author Tim Caulfield says that has led to less, not more, certainty and agreement about what is actually true. Tim Caulfield, coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. In Southern California, neighborhoods are destroyed. At least 5 people are dead, and crews are working frantically to get the firestorm in check. Crews estimate 1,000 structures have burned down. More than 130,000 people in the Los Angeles area have left their homes. Tony Espinoza is one of them.
We couldn't breathe anymore. And we had all the filters going in the house. We had HEPA filters, and nothing seemed to work.
The Emergency Services Office is urging people to wear a mask if they go outside. Steve Futterman is in the affluent Pacific Palisades neighborhood where one of the biggest fires is burning.
The damage is sometimes hard to comprehend.
It's a disaster. It looks like the end of the world, like an atomic attack.
This man witnessed the damage in Pacific Palisades. More than 1,000 structures there have been destroyed. This man lost his home.
The only thing that's basically standing is the chimney.
The major fires continue to burn. At the moment, there is zero containment. The winds aren't as strong as 24 hours ago, but they are still there. More homes are burning. This woman finally decided to evacuate.
Our house, you can tell it's next, and we're getting out.
Last night, there was a brief additional danger near Hollywood. Please leave the area. A new fire broke out in the Hollywood Hills, not far from the famous Hollywood sign. Fire crews were able to quickly respond using numerous helicopter water drops. Today, firefighters, both on the ground and now with the winds diminishing also from the air, will be attacking the numerous hotspots. Chad Augustin is with the Pasadena Fire Department. He says the crews are doing all they can.
They're exhausted. We need those reinforcements coming in, but they've done incredible work.
This man doesn't know the fate of his home, but says that's all right.
We've got our family. We are in no immediate personal, physical, financial threat.
In the next 24 hours, it's hoped the fire crews can begin to stop the fires from expanding, but it won't be easy. Steve Futterman for CBC News, Pacific Palisades, California.
U.S. President Joe Biden visited California earlier this week, but Donald Trump is also talking about the fires. He's pinning the blame on California Governor Gavin Newsom. The president-elect is using the fires to stoke his feud with Newsom and his environmental policies. The CBC's Richard Madden is in Washington. And Richard, what is Donald Trump saying?
Yeah, the incoming president is blaming California's governor and his state's environmental policies that divert fresh water to preserve the state's wetlands and wildlife. Now, Trump says that's why local firefighters have no water to douse the flames. Take a listen.
This is a true tragedy, and it's a mistake of the governor, and you could say the administration. They don't have any water. They didn't have water in the fire hydrants.
Now, the two leaders have clashed in the past. The governor's office says Trump's accusations aren't true, and Newsom had this to say about Trump.
People have lost their lives. Kids lost their schools. Families completely torn asunder. Churches burned down. This guy wanted to politicize it. I have a lot of thoughts, and I know what I want to say. I won't.
There'll be plenty of questions on preparedness and accountability, but blame usually waits until after the crisis is over. But Trump appears to be reviving his old grudge with Newsom, using those deadly fires to make his point.
So Trump is still talking about Canada and Greenland. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Trump met with Republican lawmakers on Capitol Hill yesterday, urging them to unite behind his plan for Greenland to join the United States and to pressure Canada with tariffs. There was reportedly less talk about being the 51st state, but more on how Canada takes advantage of the U.S. on trade and defense.
All right. Thank you, Richard.
Thanks.
The CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. In less than 2 weeks, Donald Trump becomes U.S. president. It appears he is prepared to impose tariffs on Canada. Ottawa says it's finalizing its response plan right now. And the CBC's Katie Simpson has new details.
And we're going to make America great again, and we'll see you in a little while.
Donald Trump stopped by Capitol Hill to strategize with Republican lawmakers as he prepares to return to the White House. The president-elect's language about tariffs has only intensified in recent days, leading Canadian officials to believe he's likely to impose those 25% tariffs as he's threatened. Canada is finalizing its response, which includes a series of retaliatory tariffs on American-made goods. According to a senior Canadian government source, Ottawa is considering targeting steel products made in Michigan and Pennsylvania, a wide range of aluminum goods, glassware, flowers, and ceramics, including sinks and toilets. Ottawa is trying to walk a fine line by selecting items that will create maximum political pressure while also not making life more expensive for Canadians. When tariffs are applied, the added cost is usually passed on to consumers. Trump rejects that idea and sees tariffs as a way to generate revenue for the U.S. and has argued it will help pay off the deficit and even cover the costs of some of his proposed tax cuts. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
Liberal Party executives will be meeting later today to discuss the rules for the party's leadership race. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will be calling into that meeting as well. Sources tell CBC News he intends to remain neutral. But the key figures at that meeting will be the caretakers of the Liberal Party, not politicians. Their mandate is to ensure the race is fair and fast. Parliament resumes March 24th. Anxiety is growing among some residents of Canada's north between U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's recent pronouncements and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's announced resignation. Some northerners feel Arctic security is at risk. Cheryl Kawaja explains.
clearly don't have any sunlight yet.
In the Yukon's far north, Vuntut Gwich'in Chief Pauline Frost doesn't mind the dark winter days.
It's a very active community.
But she does mind the current insecurity in the Arctic.
A lot of factors evolving.
The transboundary Gwich'in nations cross several borders, Alaska, the Yukon, and NWT. There's rapid climate change in the region, dwindling salmon stocks, concern about caribou herds. Political changes in Ottawa and Washington are raising concerns, particularly a president who says, drill, baby, drill, when looking north.
And it's unpredictable.
We are in the most troubled time you could imagine in terms of Arctic security.
Ken Coates chairs the Yukon Arctic Security Advisory Council.
Russian aggressiveness, Chinese interest, uncertainty in a whole bunch of different areas. And we have a situation where we're basically leaderless.
It's certainly been an absolutely fascinating week.
Whitney Lockenbauer is Canada Research Chair in the study of the Canadian North.
If Trump's bullying vis-a-vis Greenland in the last few days is any indication, there's no respect or awareness of Indigenous rights. The sensitivity to which the Biden administration, the Trudeau government, Greenland and others have paid to respecting Indigenous rights holders as absolutely key figures in setting agendas for the North American Arctic, that some of this may fall to the wayside.
In Old Crow, Frost says it's time to pay close attention.
There are uncertain times before us.
Cheryl Kawaja, CBC News, Whitehorse.
Close to half of all newcomers to Canada struggle to get affordable housing. A survey conducted for CBC suggests many immigrants are frustrated with their lives in this country, and many are thinking about leaving. As Alexander Silberman tells us, their main driver is finding suitable housing.
Cheers for the new home.
Vineet and Diksha Jen are celebrating finally finding an apartment in Saskatoon. The couple arrived from India last year with high hopes for a better life. But their hunt for housing didn't go as expected. With no credit history, references, or jobs, landlords kept saying no.
Time I was feeling like we should give up and maybe we should go back to our home country.
The Jens are among many newcomers to Canada reporting challenges finding housing. In a survey conducted for CBC News, just more than half say they found a home that is affordable. Steve Pomeroy is a professor and housing expert at McMaster University. He says a massive spike in non-permanent residents, like students, created a surge in demand for rentals.
People can get on a plane anywhere in the world this morning and arrive tonight. But we can't get a house on a production line this morning and have it ready for tonight.
But Daniel Bernhard says the problem is too little housing. He's CEO of the Institute for Canadian Citizenship.
Simply saying that we're going to slow the population and therefore solve all of our problems, I think is actually very short-sighted and distracts us from the work that we need to do.
Welcome to our new home.
In Saskatoon, the Jens say they worry for other newcomers arriving in Canada. The cost of rent in the city is continuing to climb, and scams are on the rise, leaving newer families caught in the middle of the housing crisis. Alexander Silberman, CBC News, Regina.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. Most read story at cbcnews.ca. A CBC investigation uncovers grocers overcharging customers by selling underweight meat. Sophia Harris has that for you on our main page. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. -7 across most of the province. We'll get into the conditions momentarily with Abby. It's going to be a milder day today than we've had. I'm R.C. Marcusa. This is Information Radio. You're on CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. Well, are you up early this morning studying? Maybe you're getting ready for your provincial English exam. Those are going on this week in Manitoba. And this is the first time that grades 12 students are writing these exams since 2019. It's been 5 years. You might remember last year the province last minute decided to halt things. Education and around standardized testing and how we do that across the country, but certainly here in Manitoba, has been under review for many years. And Manitoba students have been underperforming when you look at the scores on these exams also for many years. So we have comprehensive coverage this hour of this. Jim Agapito talked to students coming out of exams about how it went. Also, we have a teacher that's going to be on that says he believes more standardized tests are needed in Manitoba. So we'll have both of those points of view. Also, we have an interview about warning labels on alcohol and whether or not they would reduce the risk associated with its consumption. We're going to hear a point of view and perspective from a Gen Zer about why she chooses not to drink and what she thinks of these warning labels. Right now, though, let's go to Heather Wells for other news that's developing in our current headlines.
Good morning. Well, an Indigenous health advocate is not optimistic in an investigation into the death of a man who waited hours in the Health Sciences Centre emergency room this week. We'll get at the root of the cause. Dr. Barry Lavalley at Kiwetanuk Ininu Mininawen thinks factors like race or socioeconomic status will not be examined in a critical incident review. He takes issue with hospital officials saying the ER was congested because many people were seeking shelter from the cold there. So we'll hear the latest coming up. And a Winnipeg city councillor wants the city of Winnipeg to expropriate land from a private owner to stop the development of LeMay Forest. That's where protesters have been trying to stop the removal of trees by blocking access to the landowners. We'll hear what Russ Wyatt thinks that should be done coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells, live in our news center. Well, I know it's time to find out what's going on out there. I just asked Abby to kind of try to describe the snow. Is it more rain or snowy today?
It's more like the snow that's just going to smash in your face and you feel that wetness. And at some point, they're going to melt on contact. But we have that risk of freezing, a drizzle in the forecast sometime today. It's a mild day across the province compared to what we've been seen in the past few days. It's really mild today. Expect some conditions that would come with light snow and chance of flurries is still later in the day. Though that risk of freezing drizzle is hanging in the forecast. The winds will peak up from the northwest. It will feel colder in some regions. We're seeing temperatures around -6, -7 in the Winnipeg region at this time. This light snow is expected to taper off as you get into the morning. Then we'll see cloudy conditions. Risk of freezing drizzle, that would be of concern if you are on the highway today. And if we track the weather west, we're seeing Brandon and surrounding areas seeing partly cloudy skies with temperatures around -2 at this time. The Parkland region is currently mercy at 1. Dauphin is tracking 1 at this time. Expect some snow in the forecast for that region. And then if we head west, we're seeing more like cloudy conditions, and further north we go, we're going to see that cold temperatures with snow blowing. But for Winnipeg right now, this light snow should end this morning, followed by some cloudy skies. Temperatures will fall to -6 in the afternoon, and all I'll just say, there's a concern about freezing drizzle, so you might want to prepare for that.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
You're talking about the Parkland region, Abby, and I'm thinking about May and where her roots are in Onanol. May McKillop, I had never been to Onanol before, like this summer.
Before Communities in Focus?
Yeah, before we were down. I mean, I've been to Clear Lake years ago, but I'd never been to Onanol. Have you been up that way, Abby?
I think 3 years ago when I did that drive around, Winnipeg, Riding Mountain, Elkhorn Resorts, and then I went through the Narrows. I drove past Onanol.
This is the story. Everyone has driven through Onanol.
So
no one
I
has
drove
stopped.
past. I didn't stop.
Well, we stopped, and I'll tell you what, it was just about the most lovely people, chill community. We weren't there for a long time, so I'm not going to profess
This was on
to
your
talk.
way out, right?
It was on our way back, actually. So, and what happened was, I don't know if I told this story on the air. I'm going to share it for a minute, though, because I think it's lovely, and it kind of speaks to you, I think, because you have this lovely personality that's always very in the moment. Corey and I were trying to leave and rush back to Winnipeg. We were, and we stopped for coffee in Onanol, and they literally said to us, well, we don't want to give you we ordered coffee, and they said, we don't want to give it to you in a to-go mug because we want to be environmentally friendly, so we're just going to give you an actual mug. And why don't you sit out back in our gardens while you wait for the coffee?
You say that about garden. Wait for your coffee, not stand there.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So they sent us to the back garden with real mugs. And then they said, and I know that you ordered a breakfast wrap, but it just might take a moment. And out comes this handmade, beautifully made breakfast wrap with this coffee. And Corey and I ended up sitting there and we relaxed. And I'm like, Onanol, what's happened here? It's like drawing us in. was
It has
so
that
awesome.
way. It's kind of like time stands still a little bit, particularly in Port Michael's in the cafe there.
Which is where we were.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go if you get a chance. Lots of
If the
gems.
road condition permits you this morning, go there.
I'll say we're seeing some partly covered conditions on Highway 10.
Yeah, it might not
for
be
right
as nice as when we were there in August. So let's turn our attention back to the winter stuff. What else are you seeing? Is that part of the province is going to be more mild? Are the highways
You know
people should check?
what I'm really looking at right now is the eastern side of the province, particularly eastern of Winnipeg. Northeast of Winnipeg, we actually got a call from Shelley who wanted to let us know that she's driving south on Highway 8, just past Gimli, and the Highway 8 was pretty icy actually. She said the visibility was okay, but she faced some icy conditions. And then I'm seeing southeast of Winnipeg on highways. If you're leaving the city heading towards the border, we're seeing snow-covered conditions and quite a bit of reduced visibility in that area. I'll keep an eye on conditions, but just a reminder, plows are along those highways, so you may encounter plows on the way, or maybe they'll start to clear those conditions for you. Anything else you're seeing getting in the way or an update on any of those highways, I'm standing by if you want to give us a call. 204-788-3093.
Well, as I mentioned, grade 12 students across this province have started writing provincial English exams. It is the first time students have written the test since 2019. So this exam involves reading, researching, and writing a rough draft and a final paper. On Tuesday, I losing track of the days of the week, but it was Tuesday, Jim Agapito went out and he spoke to grade 12 students over at St. John's High School in Winnipeg. Now, these are students who had just completed day one of what is a 4-day exam.
I'm Aurora Diamond.
So going into it, how did you feel?
Stressed a little bit and a little nervous, but it was pretty chill.
My name is Phoebe Agaya. It was different from what I expected because last year I actually took the math provincial exam, but for English, what we had to go into is based on what we've learned for the past 12 years of our life. So we couldn't really study it, if that makes sense. We had to just go based on our literary skills.
My name is Catherine Rosales.
I understand that this is the beginning of a 4-day process to write the provincial English exam. How's that going for you so far?
Yeah, I expected worse for the first day because people were hyping it up oh, it's the hardest day and your hands are gonna cramp. But it's not as bad as what I've expected. Yeah.
For the first day, we had to write an exam where there would be questions and we were given articles and we had to answer questions based off the articles, but it's related to the topic of celebration. They're not all necessarily the same thing. Some of them are about birthdays, some of them are about celebrations and successes in life, and we had to do that for 2.3 hours.
We get the exam book, and we have 2 booklets. We have one that has all the reading things, and another one with what you write. And so with the reading one, we just read our an article thing. We got to choose an article to pick. We read and give our responses for it. And then there was a poem we had to do, and more reading responses, and all. It was a lot of reading and then responding, but it was pretty good still.
What question struck you?
So I had fun relating the stories that we've read to my own culture and experiences. Yeah.
How hard was that?
I think you prepare for it by timing how fast you read and write, because you can't really prepare for the questions or the theme. So it's about timing how fast you read and write.
Just sitting in that class for so long, I just really needed to stand up and walk, and so I asked to go to the bathroom just so I can have a little walking break, and they have a teacher follow you to the bathroom and just stuff so you don't walk around the hallways or go outside or anything or cheat.
Okay, you write the exam, you finish it. How hard was it then?
Not hard at all, actually. I think the only thing that was pretty much a struggle was the poem. I asked my friends about it, and even they said they kind of struggled with the poetry part.
Okay, so what have you heard from some of the students?
Everyone else agrees it was a pretty good, easy comm exam. It wasn't as stressful as everyone else made it to be, but yeah, they all agree it was pretty a comm exam.
I'm expecting that whatever we're doing here is not even as bad as compared to what people would do in university or stuff like that. So I think it's a good preparation to what we expect in higher levels of education.
So that was CBC's Jim Agapito out on Tuesday talking to grade 12 students at St. John's High School in Winnipeg. They will fully complete this exam on Friday by submitting their final paper. Now, Jim also spoke to their English teacher at St. John's about how students were feeling heading into the exam.
My name is Dan Waldron. I'm an English teacher here at St. John's. Just the fear of the unknown. They haven't really written an exam like this ever. At one point, they wrote grade 8 exams like this, divisional ones, and that was kind of kiboshed with the pandemic. So they were coming into this basically fresh, not knowing what an exam of this magnitude looks like.
How did you prepare them then for this exam?
Well, I've seen previous exams before, so we kind of go over the format. The format on this exam has stayed the same, pretty similar for years, and so we go through it. A lot of it's just understanding how to answer the question correctly, identifying what's being asked, and then finding samples within the writing and their own lives to talk about how they came to answer. You don't know what's going to be on there, so you're really just trying to take from what's happened in the past and apply your teachings the best you can to it. I think students that are going to university, this is a really good asset to prepare them, but as we know, lots of students can have success in many other ways in university. And is this necessarily the best way to prepare them for that? I'm not sure. But we do what the province tells us.
So that's English teacher Dan Waldron speaking to CBC's Jim Agapito over at St. John's High School in Winnipeg. Coming up, we will hear from a teacher, a rural Manitoba high school teacher, who says he has some concerns about the performance of Manitoba students, but also some deeper concerns about how long this has been going on and how to improve things. We've asked you what this looks like in your house. That is to say, are you a teacher? Do you live with a student? Are you a student yourself? How are you feeling being back with exams? And a small correction here. I'd mentioned the change that the province made to exams, and in last spring, Catherine Walsh wrote in, there was a provincial ELA exam written last June. It was only the spring one that was cancelled last year. But when it comes to the standardized testing province-wide, this is the first time that students have written this test since 2019.
Horse riding Ben Cartwright selling cars.
A bonanza of beauty and value.
Sheriff Andy likes his coffee in an instant.
That's why you get that real perk flavor in your cup.
And Walter White insures your prescription.
Say my name.
From Bonanza to Batman, when fictional characters endorse brands. And speaking of brands, it's a brand new season of Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland and on CBC Listen.
Sports coming up here in 2 minutes on CBC. -6 in Winnipeg as that light snow continues to fall. Well, Sheena LeGrand, Winnipeg singer-songwriter, is back after a 10-year recording hiatus. Here she is with Heroes in the Making. Feels like a song that gets us into sports and talking about the heroes in the making in women's hockey. How do you like that for a throw, Scott Regehr?
That's pretty good. You got me all riled up.
Right?
That's pretty good, yeah.
Except last night was a big night for women's hockey. So we can, I don't know if we should have carried the music over or how big. Maybe the music's too big.
We'll see. Have a listen here.
Okay.
Welcome to the ice, the Montreal Victoire and the Toronto Shifters.
it's not too big at all. There's a bit of the flavor, Marcy, from Vancouver's Rogers Arena last night. A sellout of more than 19,000 attending the PWHL game between Montreal and Toronto. The Victoire were, well, victorious in the end. Marie-Philippe Poulin scoring twice. One of those goals, if you haven't seen it, she scored from her knees while she was falling forward, all in one motion. How she got as much mustard on her shot as she did, Marcy, is going to have a number of people, including me, scratching their heads this morning. But Poulin has history in that arena. Remember, as a teenager, she scored both goals for Canada in a gold medal win over the U.S. at the Vancouver Olympics. And she used that as a reference point last night for how the women's game has changed in the decade and a half since.
I remember last time I was here, it was in 2010, and it was a sea of red and white. And now it's seas of different jersey across the PWHL. To see these crowds, it was once every 4 years. And now it's every week, every day of the week, there's potential to have sold out crowd, to have full house behind us, and it's been unbelievable.
Here's something else that's unbelievable, Marcy. As popular as the Vancouver Canucks may be in their city, they haven't played a game yet this season where as many people turned out as did for last night's PWHL game. Talk of the league expanding to the West Coast after this is only going to grow.
Look, I just watched that video of her scoring from her knees while you were talking there.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, because she actually was on her knees when the puck came to her, chokes up on the stick and makes the shot. Yeah.
Yeah, and with pepper on it. It was incredible.
100%, like back of the net moving pepper.
Yeah.
All right, you mentioned the Canucks. They are among the Canadian NHL teams also in the news this morning.
Yeah, Vancouver, the only team from this country, Marcy, to take to the ice last night. They lost in overtime to the Capitals. Calgary was supposed to play, but because of those awful wildfires in the Los Angeles area, their game against the Kings was postponed. Then there are the Montreal Canadiens, who are making headlines for entirely different reasons. General Manager Kent Hughes is defending his decision to visit Russia last month to scout recent first-round pick Ivan Demidov. Demidov plays for SKA St. Petersburg, whose coach is a very close friend of Vladimir Putin's. The coach, Roman Rotenberg, posed in chummy photographs with Hughes while he was there. Despite a cascade of criticism because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Hughes isn't apologizing.
No regret. I think we were criticized mostly on the political side. For us, this was about work. The objective was to see him play in person. It's definitely a unique case when you draft a player 5th overall, and there's only one person in the organization who'd seen him play. So I wanted to see where he was at with his game, talk to him again, face to face. I can tell you that while we were in Russia, there were several other teams that were there.
Now, that explanation aside, Marcy, Hughes did ignore the Canadian government's directive to avoid travel to Russia during the ongoing war, and the Ukrainian embassy in Canada is calling the trip now, quote-unquote, appalling.
Let's finish with tennis, where Canada's best players are hoping for better fortunes to start this new year.
Yeah, the men in particular, and it's been a great start for Félix Auger-Aliassime. The Montrealer has made his way into the semifinals of the Adelaide International. That's a warm-up tournament for the upcoming Aussie Open. Denis Shapovalov, not as successful. He fell in the second round, but the Richmond Hill, Ontario native is focused more on the long game at the moment. Having dropped into the 50s in terms of world rankings, El Chapo says he's finally feeling near his best after major knee surgery around a year ago.
The first couple matches that I played, I didn't feel like a tennis player. I didn't feel like I belonged. And then slowly I started to win matches. Not even going deep and doing well in tournaments. I was having just good wins here and there. I would say after US Open is when I actually could start pushing physically and getting back into the shape that I used to be when I was top 10.
Shapovalov says his goal for this year is to get back into that top 10, that and to celebrate a top-notch wedding. He's marrying Swedish tennis pro Miriam Bjorklund. True love.
Thank you, Scott. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.
Sounds good.
Scott is on the show every day with Morning Sports from CBC. Scott Regehr with us this morning. Still ahead, would warning labels on alcohol actually make a difference in consumption? We're going to hear someone's opinion on that, who does not drink alcohol any longer, and we'll also hear why. Your CBC Winnipeg News, though, is first.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. It is -6 and it is slippery out there. We've got light snow. We've had it since overnight. There is a risk of freezing drizzle as well. Our high today, -2 and then falling back to -6 later this afternoon, becoming windy as well. An Indigenous health advocate is not optimistic an investigation into the death of a man who waited hours in the health sciences emergency room this week will get at the root cause. Dr. Barry LaValle is CEO of Kiwetanuk Ininu Miniyawin. He doesn't think factors like race or socioeconomic status will be examined in the critical incident review. LaValle also takes issue with hospital officials saying the ER was congested because many people were seeking shelter from the cold there.
You can't blame people for being poor and blame them that the healthcare system is falling apart because we have a lot of poor people. That is absolutely unethical and absurd in its analysis.
LaValle says if investigators determine the middle-aged man who died was not exhibiting symptoms, that is no excuse. Manitoba's health minister promises a final report on the death will be made public. The City of Angels continues to burn.
Here they come! I'm gonna help you!
One of dozens of emergency crews battling 5 out-of-control wildfires burning in LA County. 5 deaths now are blamed on the fires. The flames have been moving rapidly, fanned by dry and gusty winds. More than 1,000 homes now are charred ruins. LA County District Attorney Nathan Hochman says he has never seen anything like it.
It was apocalyptic. I've lived here my whole life. I have never seen that type of devastation where literally block after block after block of houses that were there, 48 hours ago aren't there anymore.
More than 150,000 people have been forced to leave for their own safety. To deal with these fires, President Joe Biden has canceled what was supposed to be the last foreign trip of his presidency, a trip to Italy that included a visit with the Pope. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. The new CEO of Winnipeg's Downtown Development Agency is expected to create more housing. As CBC's Bartley Kivas reports, the new boss at Centre Venture is also tasked with restoring the agency's relevance.
Centre Venture is poised to do some really, really neat things.
Rochelle Squires is a week into her job at Centre Venture. The former PC cabinet minister has been handed the task of creating housing in downtown Winnipeg for people of all income ranges.
Centre Venture has a new mandate thanks to the new administration at City Hall with a focus on residential units, which I found really appealing given my background as a cabinet minister.
Squires is also expected to restore Centre Venture to a semblance of its former power. The agency has been somewhat sidelined since a rift formed between it and former Mayor Brian Bowman. That was in 2014, when True North Square was in the planning stage. Jim Ludlow is president of True North Real Estate Development. He says hiring a name like Squires signals Centre Venture's back.
It's a pretty strong signal for the organization that it's going back to a role of activity.
Developers say Centre Venture also has to resume cutting through red tape on their behalf. Bartley Kivas, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A person has died in a house fire in the RM of Portage La Prairie. RCMP were called to the property north of High Bluff early yesterday. They confirmed the home belongs to Doug Paulson, the chief of police for the Manitoba First Nations Police Service. Once the fire was out, investigators discovered human remains inside. The identity has not yet been confirmed. A court order has not stopped protesters from blocking access to LeMay Forest in St. Norbert, and the protesters are getting support from some members of Winnipeg City Council. Russ Wyatt, councillor for Transcona, hopes to bring forward a motion asking the city to expropriate the land from the private developer who owns it. Wyatt says the process would cost the city millions, but it would mean taking ownership right away.
The expropriation laws of the province are very strong in terms of protection of private property rights. It gives the private property owner the ability to have his lawyers paid for by the expropriating party, whether it be the city or the province. And it would allow us to acquire the land once and for all and save the forest.
For his part, Mayor Scott Gillingham says he opposes the idea of expropriating the land. You can find More on these stories and other news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you, Heather Wells.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells is live in our news center. Now it's time for our CBC regional forecast with Abby Adeyemi.
Good morning once again. We're looking at a mild day down south, conditions with some light snow and flurries in the forecast later in the day. There's also risk of freeze and drizzle. The winds will pick up from the northwest later. For Winnipeg and surrounding areas, we're going to see this mild condition. That light snow should taper off later in the evening, and that's the similar situation for western Manitoba all the way down to the Pembina Valley region, and the Parkland regions will be seeing the same temperatures, while up north it's going to be colder, while temperatures in Churchill and Thompson would be the coldest in the region, with wind chill reaching -34 for Churchill. But right now, Winnipeg, it is -6, and this light snow should taper off this morning, and we will be around that high of -2, with temperatures falling to -6 later.
All right. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
7:36 a.m. is the time. With a quick look at traffic, here's May McKillop.
We got a call from Julie about southbound Donald at St. Mary's. It's down to one lane due to construction, so keep right and zipper merge. Julie said it's starting to back up, but it wasn't too bad of a congestion there. If you're seeing anything else going on along your commute, give me a call and I'll let your fellow listeners know. 204-788-3093.
All right. Thank you, May. Well, up next on the program, we are in the midst of dry January, and that is where many people take a break from alcohol or just drink less in general. And the break could save your life. The American Surgeon General is in fact calling for warning labels to be added on alcohol packaging, similar to the labels that have been added to tobacco for many years, in response to alcohol being linked to several cancers. Dr. Donna Turner is an epidemiologist and chief of population oncology with Cancer Care Manitoba. She spoke with guest host Chloe Friesen on Up to Speed about some of the cancers that are now linked to alcohol consumption.
There are 6 or 7 types of cancer that are associated with drinking alcohol now. So oral cancers or cancer of the mouth, throat cancer, and your voice box or larynx. Those are also have been known for quite some time to be associated with alcohol consumption. Esophagus, liver, and colorectal cancer. So those are all digestive type cancers, which I think most people won't be hugely surprised about. The one that surprises most people that talk to me about asking questions about this link is the association with breast cancer, and it's really important that women know that breast cancer is associated with alcohol consumption, so that more than 1 to 2 drinks a week is actually going to potentially increase your risk for developing that disease.
Now, young people appear to be well ahead of the trend of giving up alcohol. A recent Statistics Canada study said that people in Gen Z who would be in their teens and early 20s are either abstaining from alcohol altogether or they've chosen to drink less per week than members of other generations. Now, of course, all the reasons are very personal. But to talk about some of the reasons that my next guest stopped drinking, she's in studio. Dakota Barker is 23 years old, and she, as I said, is alcohol-free. Good morning.
Good morning.
So tell me a little bit about your decision not to drink and, when you made it.
Yeah, it was definitely not, it was a decision that I knew was right for me. I remember I had started drinking kind of when I was in high school-ish, and that was due to internal peer pressure, but then just seeing what other people are doing and wanting to be a part of that. I want to be popular. I want to be liked. And then when I did actually get to drink, it wasn't safe because it wasn't really supervised, and I would overdo it, and I just did not feel good. The physical effects of it, it just sit in my stomach weird, and the next morning was also just horrible. It was just not something that I wanted to keep doing to myself, especially if I knew that's what it was.
That you could stop it, you could prevent that.
Yeah. And I'm lucky enough, I guess, that I was able to stop that so early.
So you're 23 now. So how old were you when you stopped? Has it been a year or 2 years, or when did you stop?
Or
maybe less. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's been about 2 years since I've had my last beer, and that was I'd have a beer every now and then. It definitely gradually dissipated or lessened.
What have you noticed about the effects from that? What did you notice right away, and then over time? What have you noticed that's been beneficial for you?
It's given me a different perspective because there's still a lot of peers around me who do drink alcohol, and that's their choice, and that's okay. But benefits as like to myself, money. I tend to overdo things sometimes, but I do know that for people who may be drinking right now, that'd be an immediate benefit. You'd save some money right away off the hop, whether that's abstaining from going out and like trying to stay in or buying for the house, whatnot. I also just found like more mental clarity. I felt like physically better about myself. And because I wasn't focusing on, I don't know, how can I do this? How can I kind of be more popular? It kind of forced me to go inward and look for more genuine connections rather than like just superficial social connections. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You have kind of alluded to this now a little bit, but aside from some of the health reasons and the physical things that felt better, not drinking you described as a spiritual choice.
Yeah, for me, it is also a political one in ways. As an Indigenous woman, that is something that I always carry with me. And as somebody who's visited my home communities, and I've seen how alcohol ruins a lot of lives in many ways. And alcohol is also a depressant, like chemically, that's how it is standardized or categorized. And it's going to make you feel lower, worse, and it's... Sorry.
Oh, that's okay, no problem.
Okay.
People don't worry.
Okay, yeah, that's right. They don't hear
Live
that.
radio, chair moves. Yeah, all good.
Yeah, so it was also a choice to be more clear in my head and just to overall better myself in a way because, yeah.
So lots of benefits. Yeah. Have there been any challenges? And I also wonder, especially around, and I don't, you can answer that any way you want, but I'm wondering because you alluded to sort of the social aspect of drinking. Mm-hmm. A lot of people say that when they do stop consuming alcohol, that's one of the first challenges that shows up.
Yeah, I'd say that was a big... the social pressure, and because I'm somebody who struggles a lot with anxiety, I'm like, oh, I have to have something in my hand. Oh, I have to do... Like I'm doing something a certain way, or that I'm with these certain people. But that is also, I can recognize ultimately all in my head. Other people are probably more focused on themselves and their anxieties, but it still doesn't like take away from that feeling of yourself, you know? And I've talked about this with other women who are in my peer group who have also stopped drinking, actually. And one thing that really stuck out to me was that she found a lot of empowerment in not drinking and going out to social settings, because there'd be a lot of men who'd come up to her, and she's more than happy. She's independent. She's a tattoo artist. I love her. But they would come up to the drink and they'd be like, hey, like, can I buy you a drink? Can I get you a beer? She'd be like, no. And be like, oh, come on, like, let me buy you a drink. And she'd be like, no, like, I don't drink.
So there's some power in sobriety?
Yes, there's power in that, and being able to exercise your agency, your self-autonomy in a way. And it is, especially if you're somebody who struggles with, if your family has a disease of alcoholism, it can be genetically, like, you can be genetically, like, attracted toward it, and it can be hard to stop. And that's something that is a lifelong battle for a lot of people, but that is ultimately... they understand that the battle of sobriety will help them in the long run. Right?
Sobriety from alcohol in that setting, I should be clear. What do you think of the stat I mentioned? You know, what do you think could be behind Gen Z, you know, younger people like yourself, as opposed to older generations like mine? What might be behind Gen Z drinking less alcohol, do you think?
I've been thinking about this since Monday, and since I first heard about this, and I have kind of come to the conclusion, like Gen Z, they do a lot of things differently. We're very open to challenge a lot of the existing systems that we have here. And a lot of us are going to therapy, and I am one of many, and it's not exactly an easy decision, but I have estranged some people in my family because our relationship was just too stressful for me.
So you're just open to changing things.
Yeah, and it's... yeah, I think a power to changing things, but I'm also a big part of why I stay sober and away from alcohol is because I've had so many people in my life who I was in relationships with alcoholics and stuff, and like that's something that I'm also still addressing in therapy, but also a part of recovering from that is also part of this 12 steps of becoming sober from being an alcoholic. You have to accept that you have no power over alcohol or the people that you love who can't control themselves around it, right?
Yeah, this is bigger than giving up. It's also personal, as we mentioned. For you, it comes into play also with a bigger, it sounds like a system of drinking that had just been happening maybe around you, that you're bold out of your generation. There's a boldness to say, I'm going to do what's best for me. And in this case, it's changing things in my life and making that change. What do you think about this warning label thing? Do you think that would make a difference if there were warning labels on packaging?
I don't really believe so, to be quite honest. As I mentioned earlier, I started drinking when I was about 15 or so. Not recommended, don't do that. But I had also started using nicotine products, vaping products around that same time. And that was also kind of same appeal, but nicotine is a lot more addictive, and was so easy for me to get. I feel like that, and alcohol and nicotine, I find in especially party or social settings, they're very much so intertwined. And
you're not looking at the label; it's not doing anything for you.
Exactly. And it's like, does the picture of open heart surgery stop the cigarette smoker from buying another pack? No, they want to get their pack. I used to smoke cigarettes. I would just put a sticker on top of the picture if it really disturbed me, but I would still smoke my next cigarette.
I'm curious if you use any of the given that you've been given such deep insight into your decisions to stop drinking, I wonder, do you use the products that are no alcohol, or have you migrated to the no alcohol beer or no alcohol wine, stuff like that, to still socially blend in, I guess, for lack of a better term?
Yeah.
Because there's lots of them now.
There's a lot, yeah, and that's something I'm really kind of happy about, because I haven't been drinking for a while, and my friends, we will go to Finn's or something, and there's lots of fun alcoholic drinks, and it's that looks really good, but I can't have that because the specific ingredient in this drink will be alcohol, and then it won't taste the same if I try it, and that's okay, I'm not gonna have a hissy fit over not being able to have an alcoholic drink, but I am noticing that there is a lot more non-alcoholic options, or mocktails
on the menus a lot of places now.
But the one thing that bothers me about it is there's a little more, if not the same price as the alcoholic drinks.
I agree with that.
So
yeah,
I think they should be a little cheaper, especially at oh my gosh, there's one thing that Gen Z does not stop talking about is we can't afford anything. We don't know if we can get housing. Whatever, that's a whole other issue. But if we're really worried about money, that could be one step to start saving that and taking responsibility for ourselves.
Come back and talk about housing, won't you? I really appreciated having you in here, though, talking about alcohol and your decision to abstain. Really nice to meet you. Thanks for being on CBC.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Marcy.
That is Dakota Barker with us. She is alcohol-free. She's 23 years old. We were talking about the trend in her generation, Gen Z, to go alcohol-free, bucking the trends of other generations. I'm wondering if you want to weigh in on this. Are you listening, and have you done the same? 788-3205 as we continue to gather stories. And you can let us know what has worked for you, what was behind your decision. As we mentioned, really personal stories.
The cold of winter melted by an array of floral artistry to warm your soul. Fleur de Ville Artiste comes to the Leaf at Assiniboine Park January 16th to 26th. Be dazzled by figurines decorated in flowery fashions, designed by Manitoba's vibrant art scene and blossoming floral talent. Fleur de Ville Artiste, proudly sponsored by CBC. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for more.
We carry a world of information in our pockets because we want to know. Breaking news that shapes our world. Staying on top of stories around the globe. And connected close to home. It's news you can trust. Delivered when you want and where you want. On Canada's News app. Now with CBC Radio 1. Local and live. Download the CBC News app for free.
Well, next on the program at 11 minutes to 8 o'clock here, as we heard earlier in the show, provincial English language exams are back in Manitoba. The first day of testing for grade 12 students was Tuesday. Now, this is their first standardized English exam since 2019, before the pandemic. CBC's Jim Agapito spoke to some students from St. John's High School who had just written the first part of what is a multi-day exam.
I'm Aurora Diamond.
So going into it, how did you feel?
Stressed a little bit and a little nervous, but it was pretty chill.
My name is Phoebe Agaya. It was different from what I expected because last year I actually took the math provincial exam, but for English, what we had to go into is based on what we've learned for the past 12 years of our life. So we couldn't really study it, if that makes sense. We had to just go based on our literary skills.
My name is Catherine Rosales.
I understand that this is the beginning of a 4-day process to write the provincial English exam. How's that going for you so far?
Yeah, I expected worse for the first day because people were hyping it up like, oh, it's the hardest day and like your hands are gonna cramp. But like it's not as bad as what I've expected. Yeah.
So those were some St. John's High School students after writing the first part of their Manitoba Provincial English exam. They were talking to CBC's Jim Agapito on Tuesday. Now, Manitoba has consistently ranked among the lowest in Canada for scores in math, in reading, in science. This is according to PISA, the Program for International Student Assessment. And my next guest has some ideas about how students here could do better. Michael Zwagstra is a high school teacher in rural Manitoba. He has studied the academic performance of Manitoba kids, and he also writes opinion pieces in the press about his thoughts on standardized testing and more. And he's here via Zoom. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Marcy. It's good to be with you.
Nice to have you on the show today. So let's start with this. These are the first tests, right? The first standardized provincial English exams since before the pandemic. As a teacher, what is your sense of the importance of having these kind of standardized exams?
Well, I think these exams are very important. I've always believed that we need to have a balanced approach to assessment. And to me, a balanced approach means that you have the teacher-created assessment, which of course would be the teacher assignments and teacher tests, because we can take local student needs and classroom issues into account when creating those assessments. But we also need an objective measurement tool, a standardized tool, because then it makes it much easier to ensure that certain outcomes are being met and that we're able to do comparisons from school to school and school division to school division. And so I've always supported having standardized tests. I know that last year the province had announced briefly that they were going to get rid of the grade 12 exams. There was a lot of pushback to that. And so the province, I think, made the right decision in reversing that and saying that, no, the grade 12 exams will go ahead. So I think they're important, and almost every province in the country has standardized testing. Even Saskatchewan, which for quite a while didn't, has announced that they're now moving to having some standardized tests at a variety of grade levels.
I'm sure you've heard the pushback before, Michael, over the years. I mean, that standardized tests may have the benefits you're talking about, but the concern is that not all schools, are apples to apples, so to speak, in terms of levels of education, and that could be because of a whole bunch of things. There could be some factors for in terms of size of classrooms, in terms of what parts of the city or rural areas they're in. What do you say to that standardized tests could create a whole other problem?
Well, what I say to that is that it's matter how we use the data, how we use the information. And so one of the great values of standardized testing is that you're able to track growth and change over time. And so, yes, you will have some schools which have more challenging student populations where the baseline results are low. But if, let's say, over a 5-year period, if you're able to track an increase, even though it may still be on the lower side, the fact that it's increasing is positive. And then we want to encourage more of that to happen. And conversely, it means that if you're in a school where, let's say, you've got a lot of students from a high socioeconomic group and they're tending to do well overall, but the results are declining, but they're still doing technically well, that still points out a possible problem that we should be dealing with. And so standardized testing is a useful tool. It's used in a variety of professions. I don't think there's anything wrong with having a measurement tool which enables us to track data and to do some of these important comparisons.
What does Alberta do differently? Because they're one of the examples that you raise when it comes to standardized testing being done differently.
Well, Alberta has more standardized tests. They do it at a variety of grade levels, not just at the grade 12 level. So that would be one thing. Alberta has been doing their standardized testing for many decades now, so they have a much longer track record of it. Alberta also releases even more data than what we have here. Now, I know in Manitoba, the results are released on a school division level. That was only starting to be released late in the term of the previous government. For quite a long time, it was just released provincially on an average. But Alberta even releases it by school. So you've got more information that's released, more detailed information, more grade levels where the standardized testing takes place, and a much longer track record of doing it. And the grade 12 exams there, again, just have that very long track record. And so those are some things that Alberta does differently. So more grade levels, more information that's released.
I just want to share with the listeners PISA, which is, I mentioned, the organization that looks at these scores right after the pandemic. So this is a year ago, the data coming out from for the period of time 2018 starting through 2022. They looked at the performances across the country. And then in math scores specifically looking at this, Manitoba had a score of 22. Just for listeners, the context of these points-based things that we're talking about is, according to PISA, a drop of 20 points is like losing out on a full year of learning. So if we're at 22, then we have significant problems in the preparedness of students. Why do you think that we have challenges here? Students continue to underperform on these tests.
I think there's a few things that we need to take into consideration here. First of all, the decline in math scores has actually happened in pretty much every province. So I don't want to overstate the situation in Manitoba. There has been a decline in other parts of the country, including in Alberta, to be honest. However, Manitoba's decline over the last 20 years has been at a higher rate than most other provinces. I think there's a few factors to consider. Again, I don't currently teach math, but I have in the past. I've always believed, and the evidence is pretty clear on this, that memorization, direct instruction, sort of more traditional teaching methods are very beneficial to student learning. And I know there's been a lot of debate about this in Manitoba and a lot of pressure from some math professors who've been pointing out that, look, we need to have a stronger emphasis on making sure students learn standard algorithms, have it at an earlier age where students memorize their times tables and such. I mean, these things are important, and I don't think there's been enough of an emphasis in Manitoba on those things. And frankly, this has been a challenge in some other provinces as well. And I will say, too, that the provincial government's plan to change teacher certification requirements by saying that there won't be any specific subjects that prospective teachers have to take before they go into a faculty of education, I think that's a significant error. We need teachers to know their subjects, and if they're going to teach math, they should ideally know math and have taken university-level math. And so there's no simple, easy fix here, but I've always been a proponent of more traditional teaching methods because the evidence shows that they are quite effective.
There's so much to this conversation. It won't be the last time we speak on it. Thank you very much for coming on with your perspective today. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
That is Michael Zwagstra. He's a high schools teacher here in rural Manitoba. Coming up, by the way, on Up to Speed today, Chloe Friesen will speak to the Acting Education Minister, Tracy Schmidt, about Manitoba kids and provincial test scores. And also we'll have to add some questions about what Michael's talking about there, which is a change in the way the teachers head into the classroom, right? They can go into the classroom to teach math, even if they haven't specialized in math at the university level. So we'll hear that interview with the Minister of Education coming up this afternoon on Up to Speed. It is now 2 minutes to 8 o'clock. Heather Wells is here with our headlines.
Good morning. Well, an Indigenous health advocate is skeptical about an investigation into the death of a man this week who waited almost 8 hours in the Health Sciences Centre emergency room. Dr. Barry Lavallee says he takes issue with the hospital official saying many people were seeking shelter from the cold and that caused the ER to be congested. He says people can't be blamed for being cold. And a Winnipeg City Councillor is proposing the city expropriate land from a private owner to stop the development of LeMay Forest. Protesters have been trying to stop the removal of trees by blocking access by the landowners. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 8:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
-6 in Winnipeg, and we're going to be around there for the day. We've got the flurries coming down, risk of freezing drizzle. Take it easy if you're driving, especially Highway 8, little icy around Gimli. Southeast to the border, snow-reduced visibility as well in that part of the province. And, of course, the plows are out, so just take care. 788-3093 if you want to reach May. Well, Premier Wab Kinew is going to be here live in studio after 8 o'clock for our monthly interview. And, of course, we have many questions about the death in the HSC ER. Stay tuned.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
The director Ramel Ross took a huge swing for his new film Nickel Boys, and that's shooting it all through the point of view of his main characters. Ramel will tell you what inspired that unconventional approach and the power it can hold in storytelling.
You don't remember? Remember what?
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
We are living in a world where we can access information more easily than ever before, but the author Tim Caulfield says that has led to less, not more, certainty and agreement about what is actually true. Tim Caulfield coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Marcia Young. More than 7,500 emergency personnel are fighting the wildfires in Southern California. The losses are devastating.
Here they come! I'm gonna help you!
At least 5 people are dead. 130,000 people are out of their homes. Entire neighborhoods have burned down. City fire hydrants are no match for the flames. Mark Pastrella is the director of the LA County Public Works.
They are not designed to fight wildfires. A firefight with multiple fire hydrants drawing water from the system for several hours is unsustainable.
CAL FIRE says 5 fires are burning in Los Angeles County. Our Aaron Collins is there.
We have a new brush fire that has just broken out within the last 5 minutes in the Hollywood Hills.
Another day, another fire in Southern California. This one burning near the famous Hollywood sign. Kristen Crowley is the LA City Fire Chief.
I'm going to go ahead and excuse myself so we can go ahead and start mitigating this additional major emergency in the city.
The Los Angeles area under siege, surrounded by flames. People scrambling to get out of an expanding evacuation zone.
The fire was basically encircling us. You could hear explosions all around us.
It's really scary when you can see the flames coming up over the houses 2 blocks away.
More than 1 million people are without power here. Resources and manpower on the ground stretched paper thin.
Mother Nature's in charge here, and we're just reacting to it.
A federal state of emergency now in effect in the area. Gavin Newsom is California's governor.
100,000+ people that have been evacuated, lives lost, traditions, lifestyles, places torn asunder.
Dry, windy weather is expected to continue in the area until Friday. The fires that weather is fanning still completely out of control. Aaron Collins, CBC News, Los Angeles.
My World Report co-host is with me in studio. He's been taking a closer look at all the resources being deployed in Southern California. And John, what can you tell us about the response so far?
Marcy, the U.S. president has declared a state of emergency triggering assistance from federal authorities. CAL FIRE, the statewide firefighting service, is supplying 1,000 engines, and we're seeing other states stepping up with hundreds of additional firefighters and equipment. From Oregon, 75 engines, New Mexico, 45, even from as far away as Idaho, and Canada as well. Helicopters from BC are joining water bombers from Quebec. Luck, also very useful as an ally in situations like this. And after the Sunset Fire broke out yesterday in the heart of Hollywood, the nearby reservoir allowed helicopters to scoop up much-needed water to drop. Speaking of Hollywood, the film community is being hit hard. Universal Studios are closed, and many household names have lost their houses. Mandy Moore, The Princess Bride's Carrie Elwes, and Paris Hilton were all hit. Comedy icon Billy Crystal lost his house of 45 years, choosing to remember the happy times, saying in a statement, every inch of the house was filled with love.
John, what about the community? How are civilians pitching in?
Marcia, LA is a town known for its love of food and diversity of food. From Vietnamese sandwich shops to taco stands, many are posting on social media that they're offering free meals to evacuees and first responders. The Yeasty Boy Bagels are deploying what is described as a fleet of food trucks. Chef Jose Andres, whose World Central Kitchen has been active in the world's war zones, has deployed a relief team. Many other businesses are opening their doors to evacuees to provide coffee, water, and most importantly, shelter.
Thanks so much, John.
Thanks, Marcia.
John Northcott with me in studio. The caretakers of the federal Liberal Party meet tonight. The national executive will discuss rules for how to select a new leader and, most importantly, how to do it quickly. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will be on the line, but sources say he intends to be neutral throughout the race. Janice McGregor joins me now from our Parliamentary Bureau. And Janice, what do Liberal MPs want to see happen when they select a new leader?
Marcia, let's be frank here. It's going to be really hard for the party executive to settle on rules and deadlines that are fair to both new voices who've been organizing from the outside, people like Mark Carney or Christy Clark, and others who until Monday were more focused on their jobs serving Justin Trudeau in critical cabinet roles. MPs said they appreciated the opportunity to speak to the party's president and national director in person at yesterday's caucus to offer their frank assessment of what kind of a contest their present circumstances require. Minister Patty Hajdu spoke to Power and Politics last night about the urgency of doing this credibly.
We want a Liberal Party leader that's elected that has the confidence of not just Liberals, but Canadians, that may be nonpartisan. That confidence comes from a transparent process that is a fair process.
Several MPs raised the idea of limiting eligibility to vote to only Canadian citizens and permanent residents. Temporary residents aren't eligible to vote in general elections, and after everything we've learned at the foreign interference inquiry last year, including them in this process raises more questions about whether Liberals take foreign meddling seriously.
What more do we know about the timelines for this race?
Minister Jonathan Wilkinson, who's considering throwing his hat in, laid out why he thinks this all needs to unfold by early March.
Whoever becomes the leader is going to need to produce a throne speech, is going to need to establish a new cabinet, and is going to need to come up with a full-blown election platform prior to Parliament coming back on the 24th. That's not something you can do in a day.
I'm going to give you a number to keep in mind here. 41. That's the number of days that the Liberal Party Constitution says need to go by between registering with the party and being eligible to vote. If you pull out your calendar and count, you can see why anyone pondering a bid needs to move quickly to get an organization in place and start signing people up, and why party officials supervising this race can't really dither over its rules for very much longer.
Thanks, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. After more than 2 years without one, Lebanon has a new president.
جوزيف عون 71 ورقة بيضاء 37.
The Speaker of Lebanon's parliament reads out the results of the vote. Army Commander Joseph Aoun was selected as head of state. The role has been vacant since October 2022. Parliament couldn't get the majority it needed to elect a new president. Aoun is seen as the preferred candidate of the United States and Saudi Arabia. Lebanon will need the assistance of those countries to rebuild after the war between Israel and Hezbollah. There's a high level of discontent among recent immigrants about their new life in Canada. A survey conducted for the CBC suggests more than 40% want to leave. Some respondents pointed to the high cost of living and a tough job market. Karina Zapata reports.
It's okay to give up. It's okay to admit that Canada is not for you.
That's Ali Kina's message to other newcomers who are struggling in Canada like she is. The 26-year-old moved to Calgary from the Philippines in 2023 in search of job opportunities and a better quality of life. But even after completing a marketing certificate at the University of Calgary, she can't find a good job in her field. So she's serving part-time at a restaurant and says she's barely getting by.
To be honest, living here has been like a survival mode for me more than living.
Kina is considering moving back home this year, and she isn't alone in that. 2 in 5 newcomers surveyed said they would consider leaving Canada. Nearly a third would go back to their home countries. University of Calgary researcher Robert Falconer specializes in public policy around migration. He says he doesn't think Canada will see a surge of out-migration because in recent history, few immigrants who express interest in leaving actually do. He says the story might be different for temporary immigrants.
We're very likely to see an increase in the out-migration of international students, of TFWs, et cetera. I think just the restrictions that the federal government have put in incentivize people leaving.
Falconer says newcomers who settle in the prairies and territories are more likely to stay compared with Eastern Canada and British Columbia. Karina Zapata, CBC News, Calgary.
And finally, the Albuquerque, New Mexico bungalow where Breaking Bad was shot is for sale. It's the one with the off-white siding, brown garage door, and the 2-car driveway. It's the house where the main character and anti-hero Walter White lives with his family as a school teacher, where he pretends to not be a meth king. Nothing in the neighborhood has ever been listed this high at $4 million. That is 10 times the average house price there. It comes with an interesting backstory of why it's being sold. The owner says She's had enough of fans streaming to her property for a look at the Breaking Bad house. That is World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Well, light snow falling in Winnipeg, and it could be a little bit icy depending on where you're at. We also have some visibility challenges to the southeast. Welcome to Thursday morning. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is CBC. You're on your morning show, Information Radio on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube this morning. Abby's in with the forecast in a moment, and then we'll get an update on those highways from May McKillop, who's filling in for Corey. Well, this half hour on the program, ERs being used as shelters for people who are living houseless, a man dying after an 8-hour wait on Tuesday in the emergency department at Health Sciences Centre, and a trip down south in a politically contentious week. We have a lot to talk about with Premier Wab Kinew. He is here live in studio. And before we speak with him, Heather Wells will be in a moment with our latest headlines. And those headlines do speak to the death in the ER this week. Heather?
Good morning. Yes, an Indigenous health advocate isn't optimistic an investigation into the death of that man who waited hours at the Health Sciences ER this week will get to the root cause. Dr. Barry LaValle of Kiiwetinoong Innu Miniyawin doesn't believe factors like race or socioeconomic status will be examined in the critical incident review. We'll hear more from him. And he says he has never seen anything like it. A Winnipeg firefighter on vacation in Los Angeles says he felt compelled to try to help save homes in an evacuated neighborhood. We're going to hear the experience of WFPS Lieutenant Romeo Petit as he has been involved in helping others in those raging fires in LA County. I'll be back with more Manitoba News at 8:30.
Heather, I was reflecting earlier that just watching firefighters in the middle of this do interviews saying we can't do anything has been like really sobering, right?
What an impossible situation. You know, It's not just the raging flames, it's the smoke and the wind and impossible.
Thank you. We'll wait for that update or story for you at 8:30.
Okay, thanks.
Right now, let's dip into what's happening here in Manitoba. So Abby is in with our forecast.
Down south, we're going to be seeing a mild and slushy day in the southern parts of the province compared to what we've been seeing in previous days. Winnipeg at this time we're at -4. This light snow should taper off later this morning, leaving behind mainly cloudy conditions. We do have that small chance of flurries in the forecast, and there's a risk of freezing drizzle to come with that. Our temperatures will reach -2 today, then it's going to drop to -6 later in the afternoon. The other part of the province with concern would be the northern part with colder temperatures and heavier snow. But for Winnipeg, we are at -4, and we will get to -2.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Well, it's interesting. This morning, I couldn't even see the lanes on Portage Ave when I was going because it was kind of slushy, icy, and moving around. Things might have improved in that regard, but what are you hearing on the commute now?
Similar from my drive in, and I will say one commuter described the conditions as deceiving. Because
Oh,
it
that's a
looks
good
like
word.
it looks like
Yeah.
a light layer of snow, but it's actually icy underneath. And as Abby mentioned, with temperatures rising up to -6 and the chance of that freezing rain, we're going to see some slushy and slippery conditions, particularly on the highways northeast out of Winnipeg and southeast out of Winnipeg. And looking here in the city, we got a call from Julie about southbound Donald at St. Mary's. It's down to one lane due to construction, so she suggested keep right and zipper merge with the fellow commuters as we do. Thank you to Julie for that call. As well, we have one call about Highway 1, eastbound Highway 1 towards the city on Deacon's Corner. It was backed up about 1 mile from Deacon's Corner, eastbound Highway number 1. Anything else going on in your condition? Anything else going on throughout the commute this morning? Give me a call on the conditions and I'll update your fellow listeners. 204-788-3093.
Well, a lot of Manitobans might be thinking, how could this have happened again? After hearing about the death of a middle-aged man in the emergency department at the Health Sciences Centre on Tuesday. Now, we do not yet know the man's name or background, but most people do know Brian Sinclair's name. He died in the HSCER in 2008. He waited 34 hours. His death did, though, lead to changes in intake and the monitoring of patients. Those changes were supposed to help prevent similar incidents, yet here we are. Now, there have been at least 4 deaths of people waiting in a Winnipeg emergency department over 2 years. In Tuesday's case, we do know the man arrived by ambulance. He was assessed as low acuity. He waited 8 hours. Staff noticed his condition had worsened. They rushed him to a resuscitation bed, but they tell CBC by then he had no pulse. Yesterday, the health minister said his death will be investigated as a critical incident. And obviously, we're going to begin talking about this with Premier Wab Kinew, who is in studio for our monthly interview. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me back.
I will get into some tough and specific questions here, but I want to give you a moment. I'm sure you want to begin with condolences.
Yeah. First, this is terrible. And the person who passed away deserved better. When you go to hospital, it's to become well. We all want to see people healed when they go to an emergency room and to come out the other side of it, not only alive, but in a better condition than when they got there. So clearly this was a failure. And for this person, I don't know personal details about them, but for the people that they knew and loved, for their family members, I want to offer my sincere condolences on behalf of the province of Manitoba. And for people from all walks of life who are looking at this and, shaking their heads and saying, like, to the question that you asked at the start, how does this happen? We're going to get the answers and we'll take action to fix this situation.
You heard Heather's headlines likely there. There are some that don't believe that in the investigation, which I know will be forthcoming here, and we'll get the details. But there are some that are questioning whether or not factors like race or socioeconomic status specifically will be examined in the critical incident review. Can you make sure that that does happen so we have a holistic understanding of what went on here?
Yeah, I don't know the person's identity and their cultural background to say whether that is something that needs to be looked at. But if it does need to be looked at, if it is relevant, then we will.
One could argue that it's
relevant. The point of a critical incident report is to learn from the mistake. That's the whole purpose behind the critical incident process being put into place, is when there are mistakes in the delivery of healthcare, let's take a careful, truthful look at the situation and figure out what went wrong. So in this incident, I personally don't know the person's cultural background or whether any other factors beyond just what you've described in the introduction there are relevant. But we would ask the people carrying out this review to consider whether factors like that are important, because if that's relevant to improving healthcare, then that is something that we need to look at. We only can make improvements to healthcare if we're looking.
Hospitals have been expected to provide a service that normally is provided by shelter services. Her quote is, that's not fair for the health providers, but also for obviously patients who are looking for shelter. What needs to change here?
So early next week, we're going to go out with the public announcement around the homelessness strategy, right? This is something that we've been working on since the election, about moving people out of camps and into homes, moving people out of bus shelters and tents and into housing. And that is a significant part of this, because when you look at why are people who are unsheltered going to emergency rooms, you have a decades-long failure to deal with the deinstitutionalization of mental health services and not having that replaced by anything in terms of how do we reach people who are struggling, combined with the lack of social housing under the previous government. There's just nothing built in terms of social housing. So what we've done now is we've strung together the different pieces in the chain that are needed to get somebody off of the street and into dignified living conditions with the supports around them to be able to succeed. And so we'll be moving forward with that. And again, this is going to be a years-long process, but it's important that we start now. And this incident, I think, highlighting the pressures on the emergency room, which part of that is the healthcare system, but part of it is also what we would call the social determinants of health. And housing is a huge, huge social determinant of health. So we need to focus on that.
I'm going to stay here because we naturally went here. So I do have two quick questions about the wraparound services that you're promising. You said an announcement next week. And then we're going to move back to some specific questions about the ER incident. But I want to ask you around the wraparound supports.
Yeah.
We've done some reporting. It can cost $50,000 per year for a client to have those supports in place. Have you budgeted for that?
Yeah. Yeah, this is all in the budget.
And what about
the thing that takes time is not the question of resources or money. The thing that takes time is getting the actual people together, the human resources that are going to go out and talk to people in the tents, the mental health support workers, the addiction services, the housing units. Standing up a new unit of housing, even if you're taking something that's an existing building and just renovating it to get ready to move somebody into, these are the things that take time, and this is why it's taken us since the election to be able to get into a position to start moving ahead with a comprehensive plan on homelessness.
What about shelter downtown? I mean, beyond there's housing, but then there's also just needing shelter.
Right.
People going in from cold, as Dr. Young said, and needing the shelter. And we just had the library space for people downtown. The library closed. The mayor was here, and he said, we don't believe it's our jurisdiction. The province should be doing something downtown for shelters. What will you do for people?
Cities across Canada provide services like that. So I think we really need everybody to step up here. But what we're doing as a province, we're building.
Just as the last question.
Well, the city's making a lot of decisions, and I think they'll be held accountable for the decisions that they made by the people of Winnipeg.
I realize we're awaiting an investigation. There are details about what happened in the ER on Tuesday that we don't know, as you've said, Premier. But I want to remind people of some recommendations that came from Brian Sinclair's death.
Sure.
So one of them was that emergency room staff must communicate directly with each person in the waiting room at least once every 4 hours, and that staff should be rotated between triage and reassessment areas of the emergency department every 4 hours to ensure that better communication. Do we know if those measures are still happening when it comes to monitoring patients that are sitting there in the HSC ER, or has understaffing allowed those measures to slide?
Well, I think everybody who goes to work in an emergency room is looking to uphold those standards, and they're looking to deliver the best quality care. But part of the reason why the health minister has asked for a review here, and why we're going to be looking very carefully at what that review turns up, is we need precisely the question that you're posing to be answered. Is that standard that everybody involved is aiming for, is that being met? And if not, why? Does it have to do with resources? I can tell you that there's a huge amount of resources being invested in the healthcare system, significantly more than ever before. But are they being deployed in the right way? Do the health human resources match the need in this particular setting? Like, are the nurses, are the healthcare professionals, the physicians, the people working in support roles, are they properly equipped, and are they with the right staffing ratios to be able to deliver the care that they want to deliver?
Don't we already know that the answer is no, though, with respect? I mean, doctors are coming out, posting out on almost like a weekly, bi-weekly basis on social media about exactly their firsthand experience in ERs. There's Manitobans that have told CBC they don't want to go to ERs. They don't trust they'll get the care they need. We had a man on this week that said it was like a war zone around him. He left without seeing a doctor. He said he'd rather die at home. Why do you think the Manitobans should continue to trust the system?
Because we have excellent people working on the front lines. And the role of our provincial government is to ensure that those on the front lines who keep showing up have the resources that they need to do this great calling that they've stood up to answer. I think there's a lot of issues in the healthcare system that we need to look at, particularly at the upper echelons of the bureaucracy. But I have full confidence in the people on the front lines. And when I hear stories from people who show up as patients and are feeling discouraged and are feeling stressed out or feeling frustrated, my heart really goes out to them. But then when we get to the question of solutions, how do we fix these things? The answer is the people on the front lines. It's investing in more healthcare workers to be able to serve you, the patient. But we can't train a nurse overnight. We can't recruit a nurse overnight. What we can do is marshal a significant amount of public resources year after year to hire more nurses, to train more physicians, to recruit more support workers into the healthcare system. So this is what we're doing. We've shown the results in 1 year, 1,000 more healthcare workers coming to the front lines since we brought in the budget last year. But if we need to correct course along the way and say, of those 1,000 workers, more need to go to the ER as opposed to the medicine wards, then we'll do that. But here's the thing.
Shouldn't you know
everything
that
in the
already?
healthcare system is interconnected, right? So if we want to address the issue in the ER, We actually need to ensure that there are those healthcare resources in the medicine wards, that there are those healthcare resources in the personal care home, that there are the home care resources out in the community. And what I'm saying in response to the question that I think you're formulating right now is we have a consistent plan, a comprehensive approach to staffing up the healthcare system that we're implementing. But when you have a situation like the one that we're talking about
On
here
Tuesday,
this
yeah.
morning, if that's a wake-up call, calling resources to a specific area of the healthcare system, then I'm telling you that we're going to be flexible and responsive, and we will course correct to ensure that we're addressing the needs that are highlighted there.
And I appreciate that you addressed and answered my question. My next question was whether or not you can point to one improvement in emergency care in the past year that has happened. And if not,
Yeah, we could point to a lot. I would say that 24/7 discharge planning with allied health professionals, more medicine beds across the system, which allows people to move out of the ER into the actual part of the hospital where they need to get care. And of course, the staffing levels have improved significantly since we've taken office. But the challenge that we're facing is a generational challenge around meeting the right level of emergency care in our province to meet the needs of the population that has been further exacerbated by the fact that Heather Stephenson and Brian Pallister closed emergency rooms. And so the beds that we need and the emergency room access points that we need to be able to meet the needs of the population are not just behind a demographic shift or a change in the way that Manitobans access healthcare. It was always made worse by the decisions of the previous government. So we are digging out of a hole that has been created by multiple factors. And when you see a situation like this, which is very, very heart-wrenching and very, very challenging, we're going to look at it in a clear-eyed way. And we're going to say, what do we need to do in terms of the structure and the delivery of healthcare resources in the system? What do we need to do out in the community in terms of the social determinants of health? And what do we need to do on homelessness?
what do you say to Manitobans?
It's all connected.
What do you say to Manitobans who are mad at you? They don't want to hear the politics. They don't want to hear how this, about the past things. They feel like you ran on healthcare and fixing healthcare. They're in the ER.
We said
leaving
throughout
ER,
the election
they're
that this
upset.
was going to take years to fix. And that was true. That was not a talking point.
And now that someone
And
has,
so
has
this
died,
is
does
going
this
to
change
continue to take years to fix. Now that someone has died, I am very, very sorry that this human tragedy has taken place, and it only strengthens our resolve to improve health care for all Manitobans.
I appreciate you taking all the questions on this topic, Premier. With our last few minutes, I will move to North Dakota, as we said we would. Been a big news politically this week, lots of political news. So you were down there talking to the new governor, rather. You talked to the governor of Wisconsin, and the outgoing U.S. ambassador was here Monday. Do you think that they will push back against Trump's proposed tariffs should they materialize on January 20th?
Yeah, I think that across the board, again, I don't want to say specific details about private conversations, but we've heard across the board, both sides of the aisle, that people recognize the importance of trade with Manitoba and trade with Canada. And so there's not a voice out there that we've spoken to that's calling for the tariffs. And so we're just going to continue working on strengthening those relationships, one, to hopefully ensure that there's more business opportunities to come to protect our jobs here. We're getting ready. We're taking the tariff threats seriously. So on the economic side, we're finding ways to roll out after January 20th, if tariffs are put into place, how do we support your jobs? How are we going to support the economy here in Manitoba and ensure that there are not just the external facing efforts that we're making, but also the things that we need to do here at home to grow our economy.
You meet with Justin Trudeau next week, but the other premiers. Do you want him to stay out of the way?
He has an important role to play because he's going to be the guy on January 20th. And so whatever retaliatory measures, domestic support measures, engagement with the U.S. federal government that needs to happen, it does need to happen with the Prime Minister in place. So there's going to be a change in government at the federal level. We all know that. There's going to be a general election later this year. But those processes are going to take months. And the reality is we need to hit the ground running right now. And so myself, the other premiers, we're engaging at the bilateral level, meaning with our counterparts. We met with senators and others this week as well, too. We'll continue that work. The federal government has a role to play, and we expect them to continue to serve Canadians in spite of whatever chaos is going out there. But what I would say as a note of reassurance to Manitobans is that we as premiers, myself as your premier, are stepping up to ensure that your jobs are being protected. And this is something that is our top priority right now.
We'll leave our conversation there. Thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Live in studio at CBC, the Premier of Manitoba, Wab Kinew. The news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 8:30. It's -4. A little bit of light snow right now. That's going to end later this morning. The wind will pick up. Our high today -2, and then the temperature falls to -6 later this afternoon. An Indigenous health advocate is skeptical about an investigation into the death of a man this week who waited almost 8 hours in the Health Sciences Centre emergency room. Dr. Barry LaValle of Kiwetanuk, Ininu, Miniyawin doesn't think factors like race or socioeconomic status will be examined in the critical incident review. LaValle says if investigators determine the middle-aged man was not exhibiting symptoms, that is no excuse.
The confluence of context for this one man was that he needed some help. If you couldn't hear him asking for help, then you're the problem.
LaValle also takes issue with hospital officials saying many people were seeking shelter and caused the ER to be congested. He says people can't be blamed for being poor. Manitoba's health minister promises a final report on the death will be made public. While the wildfires burning across Los Angeles County have now claimed 5 lives while forcing tens of thousands from their homes. One of dozens of emergency crews doing battle with 5 wildfires, now actually 6, all out of control. More than 7,000 firefighters have been deployed with equipment and personnel support being flown in from multiple states and from BC and Quebec. Now, a Winnipeg firefighter on vacation in Los Angeles says he felt compelled to try to help save homes in an evacuated neighborhood. WFPS Lieutenant Romeo Petit was visiting his girlfriend's family when their neighborhood got the evacuation order. He says once they got everyone to safety, he went back, picked up a garden hose, and started dousing embers. Petit even got up on a roof of a neighbor's house, pouring water on it to try to protect it from the flames.
These poor people who are going through this, and you see houses are burning, and I've been through it in Winnipeg. I've seen people have their house burnt down, and it's devastating. It's a loss, right? So all I'm doing is maybe if I can help just one person, just feel terrible. Just trying to help people, right? That's what we do.
Petit says in his 22 years as a firefighter, he has never seen anything like the fires in LA. The new head of Downtown Winnipeg's development agency says she plans to build back Centre Venture's capacity to help developers navigate city bureaucracy. Former PC Cabinet Minister Rochelle Squires is Centre Venture's new CEO. She says the agency will serve as a concierge to cut through red tape for downtown developers. A developer who has built hundreds of residential units in downtown Winnipeg says Centre Venture used to do this for him, but hasn't been able to more recently. Bryce Alston runs Alston Properties.
That role of facilitating conversations with different departments is such a critical piece of their mandate, or at least should be.
Squires is also expected to focus on creating more housing in downtown Winnipeg and reimagining Graham Avenue after Winnipeg Transit moves its bus routes to Portage Avenue later this year. A person has died in a house fire in the arm of Portage La Prairie. RCMP were called to the property north of High Bluff early yesterday. They confirmed the home belongs to Doug Paulson, the chief of police for the Manitoba First Nations Police Service. Once the fire was out, investigators discovered human remains inside. The identity has not been confirmed. A court order has not stopped protesters from blocking access to LeMay Forest, and they're getting support from some members of Winnipeg City Council. Councillor Russ Wyatt hopes to bring forward a motion asking the city to expropriate the land from the private developer who owns it.
The expropriation laws of the province are very strong in terms of protection of private property rights. It gives the private property owner the ability to have his lawyers paid for by the expropriating party, whether it be the city or the province, and it would allow us to acquire the land once and for all and save the forest.
For his part, Winnipeg's Mayor Scott Gillingham says he opposes the idea of expropriating that land. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you for the morning, Heather Wells.
Thank you.
So thanks to our news department, Heather Wells, Megan Ketchison, and Aaron Broman. Today's producers that had content in our programming, Corey Funk, Jim Agapito, May McKillop, and Nellie Gonzalez. Nellie's the show producer overall in CA, Current Affairs, and Leif Larson's the senior producer of audio at CBC Manitoba. Of course, thanks to our morning crew. May's been filling in for Corey directing, Abby Adiemi, our show technician, Kevin Nipatebo, our YouTube producer, and a very special thanks to Chin Kai Chang, who's working alongside Kevin on our YouTube live stream this morning. Let's have a last look at what's going on in the commute with May.
Busy highway conditions, lots of snow covering, a little bit of ice, and in some areas, some slush. So brake quickly when you can and drive with caution. Check 511 for highway conditions.
All right, thanks, May.
You're welcome.
May continues to fill in for Corey, by the way, so she's back tomorrow. And Abby, let's look at this forecast here.
It's a mild day down south with light snow tapering off at some time this morning. Expect cold temperatures and breezy conditions, particularly in the northern parts of the province. But right now, Winnipeg, we are ending the show at -4, and then we should see it drop to warm up to -2, and then gets back to -6 later.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Big thanks to everyone listening this morning. We are here for you. And this is CBC. I'm Marcy Marcusa. You're on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. If you want to weigh in on anything you heard in the show, or you have questions or ideas about perspectives you did not hear, pitch us. 788-3205. Listener line is always open. And The Current is coming up next. Stay with us.